Hello, he's Robin Ince.
And he's Brian Cox, and this is Infinite Monkey Cage. Today, I'm going to test my psychic abilities with this audience here. Now, did anyone in the audience know anyone who owned a hat?
Yes.
Excellent. So there we are. That's proved already that I have an uncanny ability to commune with the dead, or at least make loose statements that are easily applicable to many different people. It's a gift.
We're actually going to be looking at science and the supernatural. We aim to list every paranormal phenomenon that has occurred throughout all of human history that cannot be explained by science. Good night. But why do at least 3 out of 4 living people have a belief in the supernatural?
And that figure goes through the roof when you ask dead people. Thank you, Andy. That was more effective than I imagined.
Much more.
To help us flesh out the answer beyond the negative, we have a panel of experts, or the nearest available equivalent.
Our first guest has spent the last year terrifying audiences in his hit play Ghost Stories. He's also fought zombies and lost in Charlie Brooker's Dead Set and devised tricks for Darren Brown. He's an all-rounder. Well, I say all-rounder. All-rounder on a sphere made of zombies, Russian roulette and parapsychology. In fact, he's terrible at typing and not particularly impressive at volleyball. But nevertheless, it's Andy Nyman.
Our next guest started as a young magician and remains obsessed by the nature of illusion and people's fascination with the paranormal. As a psychologist and author, he has asked many important questions, like how can we find happiness? Why does the human mind appear to trick itself? And is that a duck? It's Professor Richard Wiseman.
And our final guest is a neuroscientist at the University of Bristol and author of Super Sense, Why We Believe in the Unbelievable. His next book will investigate if free will is an illusion. Why anyone would choose to write about that, I've got absolutely no idea. It's Professor Bruce Hood, and that's our panel! So all of you in some ways have a reasonable knowledge there of superstition. I want to start with you, Bruce. What is it about the human that means so many people, in fact the majority of people, still seem to require a belief in the supernatural?
I think it's really part and parcel of our makeup. I suppose there are 2 schools of thought. That they're either very gullible and believe stories which are passed on through culture, or, in my position, is that there's actually an inclination in all of us to try and interpret events in the world. And in doing so, sometimes we come up with explanations which resonate with beliefs in spirits and ghosts and all manner of things which scientifically are not viable.
Andy, in your play, Ghost Stories, you begin with a lecture, a kind of I suppose, a history of the ghost story.
Yeah.
And you point out there that it's something that's evolved over the centuries. It didn't begin as what we recognise as the ghost story.
No, well, the first historically recorded ghost stories we found were in 600 AD in Pope Gregory the Great's dialogues. And what happened to those was that was the first time really the church saw something that they recognised as, oh, that's useful, we can have that and make people feel that they should behave. Otherwise, the very notion of a spirit and an idea being written down was a powerful weapon to allow people to actually behave as they should, in inverted commas, behave. And then after the Reformation, when the Catholic Church sort of lost its power, what happened was the idea of the notion of a ghost story became a secular idea, where it was a way of being able to cope with tragedy and being able to frame terrible things that happened in your life. So it meant then that those ghost stories that we tell each other could stop being something that was just tied to the church and could now become about real life and, I saw that soldier that had been killed in whatever it was. So that was sort of the lineage, really, an early lineage of how the written ghost story came to evolve.
And Richard, so the ghost story, is that the most common cultural experience of the paranormal today?
It's certainly one of the most common. So we did a survey recently, and 1 in 4 people said they experienced some ghost-like phenomena. And of those experiences, the most common one is what people refer to as the incubus, which is the demonic figure that comes in the middle of the night and sits on your chest, pins you down, makes you sexually aroused and scares you. At least that's what he does to me. I don't know about... I now realise that I could be overgeneralising my own experiences and no one else.
But for those of you listening on the radio, he did that purely with the look on his face.
But no, the look on your face did not suggest that you were the victim. The look on your face suggested a man who occasionally dons a sheet and thinks, I'll go into that room. A man who's using psychology, possibly for evil, yet again.
Anyway, so the... The incubus, which has been around a long time, basically it takes very many different forms. And so if you're into alien abduction, you think it's an alien that's sitting on your chest. And if you're into ghosts, then it's a spirit rather than a demonic force like the incubus. So what's interesting about the experience is you find it in pretty much every different culture throughout time. And there's a very good psychological explanation for it. I don't know what it is, but no, I do. It's that when we dream, we become paralyzed, so we don't act out our dreams and injure ourselves. And as we drift from dream state into waking state, some of the bizarre imagery comes across, and so does the notion of being paralyzed. And you try and interpret that, you try and make sense of it, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm paralyzed, there must be somebody holding me down. Now, oh my goodness, I see this evil spirit, that's what's happening there. And what's really interesting is that experience that can be terrifying for people if you buy into the idea of demonic forces or ghosts or aliens, once you explain the psychology, is actually not at all scary. And so it can help people to know the psychological explanation for it.
So some people who've had this, people can actually kind of embrace the cure for it and will take on reason in this, because obviously, the battle of reason against superstition is a difficult one.
Absolutely. Same with hearing voices. I mean, if you hear voices, you think it's the voice of God or the dead, that's scary. As soon as you know that our brain produces internal dialogue for all sorts of reasons, actually it's not so scary. So in that sense, being rational can help you. Saying that, there are genuine demonic forces out there.
Which I imagine your next book will probably deal with.
My next book, Genuine Demonic Forces. Yes.
See you in your room later, I'll be in the shoot.
But Bruce, Richard there has given an explanation for I suppose the appearance of ghosts or the perception of ghosts in the space between wake and sleep, sleep and wake. Mm-hmm. So is that the general explanation for these, I suppose, misfirings of the cognitive system?
People who are inclined towards these notions tend to see structure and order in otherwise ambiguous patterns. There have been experiments showing that they will see structure and patterns in what is effectively random noise.
Why are we predisposed to do that?
Well, I suppose it's really an evolutionary strategy is to assume the worst, which is possibly another agent or a predator in the bushes, or somebody's about to beat you over the head and steal your food or your mate. And therefore, you always tripwire to assume there's an agent out there to do you in. So it's a better strategy to assume there's something there rather than ignore it.
And Andy, is that the basis of the success of ghost stories throughout the ages, that we're pre-programmed to be scared? Because we also seem to enjoy it.
Oh, I think we absolutely love ghosts. I think, most people love the idea of being scared and there's something absolutely life-affirming about going to a horror film or a play in the West End called Ghost Stories running till July this 16th, perhaps. Duke of York's Theatre, bless you for that. But yeah, there's absolutely, I'm sure, some sort of primitive drive within us that the choice to believe isn't always, sometimes it's so near the surface, it's amazing. And a couple of years ago, there used to be a hilarious psychic hour on a London radio station. And I was listening to it, and there was a woman on there who was a phone-in, and she'd phoned into the psychic and said, this extraordinary thing happened. I don't know that you're going to be able to explain this. She said, I live at home with my cats. And not making it up, but I felt like saying, So home with my cats, and I have a piano. And I'd gone to bed, and the piano was down. And I went to bed, and I suddenly heard 4 or 5 notes playing on the piano. And I came back down, and I had a look, and the thing was down, and it was, couldn't have been the cats. So they had a skeptic on there as well, and the skeptic said to her, look, well, one of the interesting things is that pianos, because it's a string instrument, fundamentally, and that they contract and expand in heat, and sometimes you'll find in changes of temperature that it sounds like notes are playing. And she went, And then the psychic said, the other thing is that fairies play notes. And she went, yes, I think that... What's extraordinary is that the desire to believe it is so overwhelming that all logic flies out of the window to just grasp onto something magical.
But to get back to your very good point about whether we enjoy being scared, I actually don't think we do. I think what's interesting about plays and about stories is we know they're not real. Is that you can explore the notion of the ghost in a relatively safe environment. But actually, when you do see a ghost, as it were, you are very scared, and that isn't quite such an enjoyable experience. And to me, it's the same as going on a roller coaster. that you're being thrown around and it's all rather fun because you know it's safe. As a good practical joke, if you go on roller coasters, take on like a rusty bolt and then just as it's moving off, just palm it and take it out and then say to your friend, oh, is this supposed to come out? Because then they experience genuine fear.
But this is something that I find, because I was, as I imagine actually most of this panel today, who were all somewhere in their 40s, brought up in a world of Unexplained magazine, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. We were surrounded by ideas of ESP, Bigfoot, Loch Ness, spontaneous combustion, and yet, none of us, as far as I know here, have clung on to those ideas, even though they would have been, put into us when we were quite young.
But they're all gorgeous ideas, though, aren't they? That's what makes them so seductive, is they're all, as you say, all of those, you just feel, God, Bigfoot, don't you wish that was real? The myth of it is so great, and Nessie, and I think that's really part of it, is this, it's almost like great advertising, they're so perfect, those ideas, that they feel, how could that not be real? It's just brilliant, and you almost want it to be.
Did you have a moment, Andy, where you just the way the passion you talk about it now, where you reached a certain age and you went, I don't think there is a Bigfoot, and I don't think I'm going to take the train to Scotland, because I don't think at the most there'll be a jumping otter.
I've never had that moment. No, I've never had that moment. I still sort of, whilst I am deeply sceptical and, I believe what I believe, but no, I mean, there's still that little tiny bit of me that wishes on the news tomorrow they go, Bigfoot's been found, look, here it is. You'd think, oh, that's brilliant.
Watch Fox News. That will greatly increase that chance, I think. See, that then interests me. Is there something in the wiring where, there are lots of things that I would love to believe in, but I just go, no, it can't be. And it's not just about reading, it's not just about education, because there's people that I know who've read widely and still cling to beliefs that I wouldn't be able to make that leap. So is there something actually within us?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, we tend to believe what we would like to be true. Francis Bacon said that about, rationality in general, that we prefer to believe what we would like, and that includes an afterlife. But yeah, I happen to think that there is a real difference between people who are very much inclined to sort of the woo, as we call it, because they do tend to score very similarly on measures of personality. They're more creative, they're more that kind of notion. I'm not suggesting that it's black and white, but there does seem to be a profile which fits with this kind of way of thinking.
I know, Richard, actually, you have an experiment you could do on the audience to try and seek out people of that persuasion.
We could do that. We could do a little test here of essentially imagination. So what everyone...
Close your eyes, he'll put a sheet on.
That's right. I'll work through the group one by one. Yes, everyone can try this, and try this at home as well. What you need to do is hold out your hands straight in front of you, palm down. So a kind of Superman flying pose. So both hands out, stretched out in front of you, palms down, and level is very important. Excellent. And now don't consciously move your hands, but all you need to do is close your eyes and listen to my voice. And just imagine a helium balloon, a very light balloon, attached to a string, and the end of that string attached to the fingers of your right hand. So your right hand being pulled up towards the ceiling, gently being tugged up by that helium balloon. Then there's the heavy books, another set of heavy books, attached to another string, attached to the fingers of your left hand. So your left hand being pulled down towards the floor, your right hand being pulled up towards the ceiling. Just focus on my voice as you imagine that right hand being pulled up, left hand being pulled down. Don't consciously move your hands, but keep them exactly as they are. And now if you open your eyes. Excellent.
That was amazing, Richard, because every single person in the audience did that, very markedly, the difference in their hands, every single one of them. And you were saying there's a reason this experiment's never been done on television.
No, what you had there were around about 10% of the audience being highly suggestible, which means their hands, the right hand is higher than the left one. Most of you, being a rational, sceptical, scientific audience, your hands were level. Some of you, I noticed, your hands were the other way round, and that's just odd. So what does that mean? Well, it's to do with suggestibility. So the people whose hands were markedly different, the bad news is you're very suggestible. If you go to a hypnosis show, you'll probably end up on stage eating an onion naked. The good news is you've got very good imaginations. The people whose hands were level, you're more down to earth, you're less likely to see ghosts and have these weird paranormal experiences, and you have rubbish imaginations and you're not at all creative. So that simple test is a way of getting at imagination, and again does split between the believers and the skeptics very well.
I'd just like to add, though, of course, you can increase this or enhance this effect by just putting people in stressful situations. For example, if your plane starts to plummet at 35,000 feet, you'll start to become quite superstitious and ritualistic in your behavior. And of course, just telling people they're in a situation where there's been a death in the house or that there's a loss of control, and they start to become more ritualistic, they become more superstitious. So it's an inclination that can be swayed by context very easily.
And is that in some sense, when you're under pressure, you're stripping away parts of the rational mind, in a sense?
I think when you're under pressure, you're under stress. And one thing that we don't like is to be stressed. And so we seek out control. And when we believe we have control, either through our rituals or our processes of superstitious behaviors, we feel we're controlling the situation. That inoculates us against the worst excesses of stress.
I think that gets to the root of it, because I think that summarizes what's underneath the whole of the paranormal experiences, that we don't like uncertainty, and we really don't like uncertainty in stressful situations, and somebody comes along with a magical solution. And of course there's the desire to believe. If you've lost a loved one, and somebody comes along and says, actually, you can still communicate with them, or you're not well, and somebody comes along and says, actually, you can have a psychic healing, then it's very human to go, my goodness, that would be wonderful. The problem here is there's no evidence to back up any of these things, so you end up believing things that aren't true and actively damaging yourself and others in the process. But I think that it gets to the root of it, that we don't like uncertainty, particularly when we're stressed.
Well, you were just saying there but you mentioned psychic mediums there as well. And is there actually a use in terms of, do people, say, who've been to a psychic medium event, have they gained something? Is there some good that they've gained out of that experience?
Well, of course, this is where the controversy really starts to rein in. Yes, they may feel that they've gained something, but they've also lost a lot as well, which is usually financial. And some people would argue that really, we shouldn't be supporting these belief systems, which potentially can have negative outcomes. And I'm sure Andy and Richard have both had this sort of experience.
It's not, to me, it isn't really about, does the person who's receiving the reading gain anything? If the person giving the reading is what is known in the trade as a shut-eye, someone who believes what they're giving, then to me, whether they believe it or not, at least it's sort of given in good intention, as opposed to the coldness of the taking money for this, the scam of that from a person known as an open eye, who's a fraudulent one. That, to me, I cannot get my head around how people can operate on that level.
And it is very difficult often to attach the appropriate weight to coincidence, which lies at the heart of many of these belief systems. I suppose with psychics, the ones that really believe they're psychics, they will always say something that's close to something someone in an audience has experienced.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's just that, we're opening up a whole other area now, which is the fact that we all believe we're so different, whereas actually the reality is we are all fundamentally exactly the same animals, be that living here or living in southern states of America, wherever it is. So if you make a random open statement here, it's going to apply to X amount of people here as it will do there. And as long as it's of a personal level, you feel, that's touched me. How could you know that?
I think that the notion that we're more predictable than we think is crucial to the success of mediums. And so when we all think, if you take a very general statement, you're an above average driver in terms of safety, about 90% of people go, yes, I'm above average driver. You can go into hospital wards where people are in there because they're of accidents that they themselves have caused whilst driving. It's still 90% of them think they're above average driver. 95% of us think we have an above average sense of humour. There's very few people that go, no, I just don't get it. So we're more predictable, we think, and so psychics come out with these relatively general things, like you have a lot of untapped creative potential, and we all go, yes, my goodness, how insightful, that's true. And so we don't realise that we are quite predictable, and that people can use that and then to allegedly tell things about us when they know nothing at all. So in terms of what people gain when they go to a medium or a psychic, I think they gain a greater belief in something that isn't true. And that's pretty much it. They might get some sense of comfort, but it's not going to be a long-term sense of comfort. Counselling, mainstream counselling, is about giving you the tools to solve this problem and future problems, so you don't have to keep on coming back to the counsellor. The psychic just gives you the solution and you become reliant on them. That's very, very different.
There's also something I'm so sorry, that we're just beginning to sort of see again and again, which is this notion of a sort of quick fix as well, isn't it? There's an ease to these solutions as opposed to actually working for a solution.
Is there a sense in which the belief in the paranormal appears to be growing. I mean, it certainly feels that way. And I know that you work, Andy, with Darren Brown a lot. Now, I know that he's absolutely careful to say these are tricks. However, many millions of people watch the shows. So is there a sense in which the belief is growing in our scientific age, that it's just not being suppressed at all?
There's an interesting thing. I wrote with and sort of directed Darren stuff for 10 years. And the interesting thing about the Darren product, as an idea, was that the NLP gurus said, this is the greatest, even though, Darren stands there and says this is magic, conjuring, science, hypnosis, whatever. The NLP brigade said, this is the greatest form of NLP we've ever seen. The psychics said, well, you can dismiss it, but you clearly have a gift. And the magicians all said, this is fantastic magic, I've never seen it. So everybody kind of embraced the bits that they wanted to see. But Richard and I worked together years ago. We did a séance.
We did, and there we were staging a theatrical reconstruction of a séance, and we told people that's what it was, but still it was pretty terrifying for people, because once you're sitting in the darkness holding hands with a stranger, it can be very scary.
And then you start a séance.
Yeah. But to answer...
There's a subtext to your work, isn't there?
I would remove the word sub at this point.
Yeah, it's the no, mate. Let's not go there. So anyway, so to answer your question about belief in the paranormal, it doesn't actually seem to be on the rise. It's always pretty high. It's around about a third of people claim to experience any of these weird things, ESP, telepathy, ghosts, and so on. And that's stayed pretty stable. You see it bumping up and down a little bit. And that suggests, to me at least, there's something there which is keeping that thing stable. And when you get, all the sort of paranormal programming piling in and saying all this stuff is true, it goes up. And when you get more skepticism on TV, it goes down a little bit. But it's pretty much bumbling along there for the last sort of 50 years or so.
I suppose to bring this discussion to a close, there's a sense in which we've sat here and we've tried to understand this phenomena that isn't there, and we've had this clear view, which we would have because it's an infinite monkey cage, a bastion of rational thought. Is there any harm in it? I mean, because does it matter? Does it matter if, as you said, a third of the population believe in the paranormal? Many people have had paranormal experiences. Are we supposed to be trying to cure them in a medical sense?
I think you just have to be on your guard. It's the consequences of these beliefs is what we should be paying attention to. People who have these beliefs can be generally kooky types of people. And, creativity, a lot of the artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of very creative people have all these kind of ways of thinking about the world. I don't want to dissuade them from those kind of beliefs, but if they start to impact on their health and the health of others and the well-being of others, then clearly they've got to be stopped.
I think it's enormously important because people go to psychics and you wouldn't turn up to buy a second-hand car knowing nothing about cars at all. You'd know you'd get ripped off. So you'd either learn or you take somebody with you. Yet people go to a psychic. They're not informed consumers. They say, here's the problem. They're there because they have a serious problem, financial or relationship or health or whatever. And then the psychic does something which appears to be amazing, and then the person follows that advice. And you're sitting opposite somebody who's got no counselling qualifications. Anyone can set themselves up as a psychic, and still people are sitting there taking the advice. So I think there really is a problem. It's a huge industry in this country, and yet people have no idea what they're up against.
Yes, these plays about ghost stories and things make a fortune. If
only that were true.
By the way, I found the most interesting of this panel is having people who are all based in psychology. I really expected some subtle advertising for everything you were doing. And finding out that the simplest form is just to mention your book or take your closing note. What a relief to find out all those courses I've been on were a waste of time.
I've mentioned mine.
Oh, that's what you say. But if we replay this tape now, find out if we take every second syllable, you will find quirk, G. So there we are.
What's going to happen to everyone listening? If you play this backwards, you'll hear a voice saying, Richard Wiseman, $7.99 Amazon. ISBN 3.
See, now you've got, because we were talking about this afternoon, you decided that ghosts definitely didn't exist, which is unusual for you, because normally you kind of, err the side of caution. But you had a specific argument, if anyone says the ghost, from the perspective of physics, why it's ridiculous. Not just generally from why the laws of physics mean that ghosts are far less likely than we might have thought.
Well, I think they're perpetual motion machines. I mean, they violate the laws of thermodynamics as far as I can see. I mean, we process information by eating food, and there's an energy source and a temperature difference, and that's the way that our brain works. And once you turn that off, I don't understand how... Well, the reason I don't understand it, by the way, is because it's rubbish. I don't know why I don't know why I'm explaining it. But they are essentially...
the fact that nevertheless, your scientific mind couldn't go, which just seems absolutely ridiculous to be a kind of see-through-y version of you that would drift around and go, and not only that, the laws of thermodynamics, which are acceptable for some zombies, but not those who've actually lost their stomach lining. Yeah. So we asked the audience what was their most ridiculous paranormal experience, and here are some of the answers. This is from Martin. Having a medium explain to me how his wireless modem was possessed and needed an exorcism.
My cat died. My dad could still hear it purring. It turned out to be the boiler.
Hang on, was that the boiler that killed the cat? My hamster made a crop circle in its bedding. That was from G. Host.
My daughter told us one night the house mooed.
There's one here, seeing Albert Einstein sitting in my seat the night before my final physics exam.
Changed to...
There was a slight of plausibility there that I didn't like from the audience.
Well, hopefully now that is everything explained about ghosts, but we should still end on a warning. Though we may have at times appeared frivolous in this show, please do not attempt to summon the dead or mess with the dark arts, as they frequently stain. And if any of the issues in this show have affected you, then don't be so silly.
Thank you to our panel, Andy Nyman, Richard Wiseman and Bruce Hood. That's the end of this series. We'll be back in November. Until then, stay rational.
They wanted us to be a bit... Brian, do you really think we're going to come back in November?
I don't know. I'll have a look at the tarot cards.
That doesn't look very good.
Robin, it's dark in here with the lights out.
Of course it's dark, Brian. My plan has worked. You believe in science, and now you are mine!
And now I'm going to go back into the RADA Studios auditorium and join the panellists and presenters Robin Ince and Professor Brian Cox, ready for The Infinite Monkey Cage.
Hello and welcome to You and Yours. I'm Jacques Cousteau.
And I'm Valerie Singleton.
Today we're going to ask whether physics is merely a fable to fabricate the ponderings of God's mind, and why the most rapidly growing language in the world is sheepdog trial whistling. And is it true that Brian Cox keeps seeing Niels Bohr's face in a piece of toast?
For those who haven't realised yet, this week's theme on The Infinite Monkey Cage is deception.
Yes, despite his brilliant impression, Brian is not Valerie Singleton. Yet. Do the voice again.
Hello, I'm Valerie Singleton.
It's uncanny, absolutely uncanny. So,
today we're asking, is deception a necessary part of the human condition? Is it possible to be wholly truthful and survive in our culture? Once we believe a lie, why is it so hard to be convinced we were misled? How can we spot the lies of charlatans, politicians and greengrocers?
Not just greengrocers. Grocers, butchers, fishmongers, winkle pickers. To help us out, we have a panel of 73 people, 2 of whom arrived at Roswell in 1947, and one of whom is a robot currently trying to get his Duke of Edinburgh Turing test badge. See if you can work out which one it is. So, our panel is...
I'm Professor Richard Wiseman, psychologist at University of Hertfordshire and magician, and my best... No, I am. That's not a lie. That's sad, isn't it?
No one's going to believe a word anybody says.
That's it.
It's weird because no one looks more like a magician than you.
Exactly.
You really have
Exactly.
an Ali Bongo magic-y face.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Yes, so that's, yeah. And my biggest lie, which is a lie, was convincing a 6-year-old child. I was standing by him and there was a wind turbine. And I convinced him that it was responsible for producing wind. And that if they stopped, there would be no more wind ever. And that's the lie I'm most proud of.
My name is Sophie Scott, and I'm a Professor of Cognitive Neuroscience at University College London. And my biggest lie was allowing people to believe that I was dating the bass player from The Cure.
I'm David Aronovich, columnist with The Times. My speciality is conspiracy theories. I wrote a book about it called Voodoo Histories. It's not fair that I've been asked this question about lies because I'm older than any of you and I've had a considerably longer to lie.
How old are you?
I'm 43.
What? You're getting a laugh for saying that you're in your mid-40s. Yeah.
It's also the fact that the moment you're near Brian, everyone else who leaves here, you will all look considerably older as he sucks your youth out of you.
I'm still gorgeous, but look at those, just crushes of human beings.
And this is our panel. Richard Wiseman, the magician. Let's start with you. So are all humans, are we natural liars? Are human beings natural liars?
I think we are. We certainly do a lot of it. So in surveys, it depends what you count as lying. If you count leaving out information, then we're doing it all of the time, pretty much. In terms of big lies, then it's around about 1 or 2 lies per day. We did some work a while ago with asking people, do you tell lies? And we had 8% of people that claimed not to tell any lies ever in their lives. So it's the 8% that couldn't even bring themselves to tell the truth on a survey, basically. Pathological. So we do a lot of it. We've always done a lot of it. There are hundreds of lies being told every moment, and we're not very good at detecting them. So I think there is something in us that means we are natural-born liars.
So how many, you're saying that 1 or 2 big lies a day. So what kind of lies would they be? If we could just kind of class how many lies, this survey, it's a difficult survey to do, isn't it? How often do you lie in a day?
It is, because it comes down to what counts as a lie. So if you meet somebody and you can't stand them, and you say, oh, hello, nice to see you, is that a lie? Should you have said, I can't stand you? And so people wouldn't really class that as a lie. Once it's into lying for your own good and you're withholding information that is clearly exploitative and so on, then you get to white lies. When someone says, does this, whatever, dress suit me? And you go, oh, yes, that's great. And you're thinking, my goodness, no. All that. So it's a very difficult thing to do, but certainly we're doing a lot of it.
And are you good at lying?
No.
But the listeners on radio...
I'm really not. I'm not a very good liar. Magicians tend to be quite good, but I'm absolutely terrible at it. So if you hear it from me, it's the absolute truth. Yeah.
Well, David, Richard said that we're not very good at spotting lies or deception, but as a columnist and a political journalist, you're surrounded by the professional deceivers, I would say. Does it make you more sensitive to picking up deception?
It makes you interested in what people believe and what they want to believe, and in the nature of desiring to be deceived. But it also makes me interested. If you're talking about politicians, the most successful politicians narrow the gap between what they believe to be true and the thing that they have to say. And if necessary, they change the thing that they believe so that they don't have to lie. So, for instance, Paddy Ashdown once famously said about Tony Blair, who'd made some promise or other, which he couldn't then keep. He was asked, did Blair believe it? And he said, well, he believed it at the time he said it.
So it's a technique, it's almost method acting in a way then, because they're not actors. And so in order to be absolutely convincing and believable, you change your belief rather than try and act.
Well, yeah, I think that's a thing to do for a very successful one. But also, quite often this lie is within, or what you might call lying or deception, is within the game. People know what is being done. People know that the thing can't possibly be the way that it is said, but they won't have it said any other way. Take something that happened a few months ago, the Emily Thornberry tweet. You have to have a whole tissue of lies about what people's attitudes are to a guy who flies England flags outside, and everybody becomes incredibly, it's not just hypocritical, they're actually deceptive about what they think. Ed Miliband says, I've never been so angry about anything in my life. Of course he has. He's been far more angry about things, but at the moment when he said it, he had to make himself angry enough to justify the phrase because it was what he needed to do.
Sophie, are we then good or not particularly good at spotting deception and lies, if they're outright lies rather than this more sophisticated form that David's spoken about?
Generally, we are poor at it, and I think that seems to be for a number of reasons, partly because a lot of normal discourse relies on it. As Richard said, we're not saying everything we want to say. When somebody asks how you are, you hardly ever tell them. And also because I think a lot of so discourse is predicated on a sort of an assumption that people are telling the truth. You want to believe people are telling the truth. Every single person I've ever met who's encountered somebody burglarising their home, there's been a point when the burglar has just lied to their face. Like, I was looking for Alan. Is Alan not here? Again, it's predicated on that notion that you will believe people. And there's some interesting work on actually what's happening when people lie, exactly like you've already picked up on, that if you believe it, very often your behaviour won't be giving clues away because you're in the mood, you're in the spot, this seems like the truth to you. When you can pick up things associated with lying is when there's an emotional cost. So I'm telling you something and I really want you to believe it. And what a psychologist called Paul Ekman has found is that people continuously leak little facial movements that betray the underlying emotional state that you can use in a situation where you suspect somebody's lying to pick up the emotional cost. You're still not picking up the lie, you're picking up the emotion that might be associated with that.
So by emotional cost, so you mean a situation like, I suppose, if you're the captain of an aircraft and all the engines have fallen off and you're saying,
yes.
No, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, this is absolutely fine.
So there's
yes,
a big cost.
absolutely. There's some cost to you, or no, I definitely, she was just in my room to pick up a book or something, something where you're desperately trying to, you really want the person to believe you, and for whatever reason, good or bad reasons, it matters to you that they believe the lie, and that's what causes the cost.
So what's a poker face then?
Well, a poker face is exactly somebody trying to control all of this. So poker face is somebody trying to not let anything through, either through trying to, they're not even bothering with a masking emotion, they're just trying to keep their face completely straight. And it's more or less impossible to do. If the emotion is going on, bits of it will leak through.
So the poker face, I wonder how much of the ideas of all of the techniques that different poker players have, that most of that is merely the addition of theatricality to actually a mixture of kind of nerve and luck.
Well, I think what they're trying to do is control not only the facial expressions, but all of the non-verbals we give away or we think we give away when we lie. And we're trying to make that decision about other people all the time. And there's a lot of evidence that we make it primarily visually. So we're looking for people who move around and suddenly rub their hands together and look sort of strange facially. Actually, there's not very much evidence that those are very good signals. So in fact, if you want to detect a lie, you're much better off listening to the voice, the words the person's saying, rather than depending on those visual signals.
You published a study on this about 10 years ago now, wasn't it, in Nature? A big experiment.
Yes, this was a big thing we did originally with Tomorrow's World, actually, which was a BBC Science programme, where we had Sir Robin Day, and I interviewed him twice. Once he told me the truth, and once he completely lied, each time about his favourite film. And then we played those on television, and we asked people to try and spot the lie. We had many 1,000 people phone up. And
so you played both the
truth and the lie, and said, which do you think is the lie? And people, as has been shown time and again in experiments, you give people 2 video clips like that, one's true, one's a lie, which is the lie? They're at 50-50. They're at chance. We think we're really good at it, we're not. As soon as we stripped away the visuals and played just the audio track on the radio, people were much better, because suddenly you focus their attention on the words and how they're being said. Under those circumstances, we become much better lie detectors.
It's not that the radio audience is more intelligent than the television audience and more perceptive.
In this particular experiment, that could be the case, actually, although it was Radio 1. So make of that what you will.
That's fantastic, the idea of Robin Day on the Radio 1 roadshow.
But in the lab, of course, you can randomise people into the 2 groups, and you get exactly the same effect. So in terms of the verbal signals, you have people giving far less detail. They don't mention themselves so much. There's an emotional distance, I, me, my, those sorts of words drop away. They tend to give a longer distance between the end of the question, beginning of the answer. All these things are really apparent when you listen to the soundtrack, to the audio, not so apparent when you're overwhelmed by the visual signals.
So does that mean you're in part disagreeing with what Sophie said about these visual signals, the facial expressions? You're saying that the voice and the way we speak is a more...
No, so I'm saying the voice is really important. Most visual signals are distractions. What Sophie's talking about is the micro expressions, which, yes, if you're trained and you know exactly what you're looking for, then that's great, but most people aren't trained in it, so they're going on, does the person look nervous, and so on.
You can think of being able to decode micro expressions as being like being able to do phonetics. So you could listen to my voice and say, I can tell that you grew up in Blackburn, but your mum's from Belgium. That kind of, forensic detail most people can't do. It's like that, but for facial expression. So you have to, train to do phonetic decoding. It takes hours and hours and hours of training.
Does this mean, if we look back to the origins of deception, then, so the evolutionary origins of deception, we presumably can trace it back all the way through. Are there other animals that exhibit deceptive behaviour?
There are examples. I think sometimes, because you're reliant on human observers telling you about these, sometimes these are humans being a little bit romantic about animals, like, look at that cheeky little sparrow. She wants to mate with that other sparrow. They've gone hiding. Oh, yes, they're up to something. So, that's possible. It might just be some sparrows mating. I mean, building deception into that. But there's a theory, quite an interesting theory about primates that says part of what's driven the evolution of very large brains in primates is the sort of social processing you need to do to lie and to deceive. So if you look broadly across primates, you can see primates with smaller brains tend to deceive each other by kind of, if I wanted your water, I'm trying to think of a good way of doing it, I might sort of scream, you look why I'm screaming, then I nick your water. So it's kind of quite basic deception, that as you move up larger brains, basically, you find more complex patterns of deception. And when you get to chimpanzees, it really starts to look pretty human, actually.
So you're suggesting that to operate in large social groups, deception is a necessary behaviour?
Well, potentially, particularly for the sort of large social groups that primates live in, which are very hierarchical. They're not, whatever Russell Brand tells you, they're not large cooperative groups of monkeys who are all sharing
So that
a happy life.
does that mean that the highest form of evolution we've achieved so far is Jeffrey Archer?
Yes.
It's also related to the question of what age do we start to lie as humans. And there's some lovely studies where you bring kids into the lab and you put them in a room and you say, OK, we're setting up your favourite toy behind you, but don't look. And then you walk out of the room and say, whatever you do, don't look at the toy. And then you watch them with closed-circuit TV. And after a couple of minutes, they'll look at the toy and then they'll go back again. And then you come back into the room and ask the key question. You say, did you look at the toy? So you find out whether or not they're prepared to lie. You do that with 3-year-olds, so they've only just really mastered language. Already, 50% of them will lie about looking at the toy. You go up 2 years to 5-year-olds, and I kid you not, this is the results. There isn't a single 5-year-old that will tell the truth. So that's why you must never trust your children under any circumstances.
Good advice there from Radio 4.
Absolutely.
Before we go into David's experiment, which we're going to do in a moment, can we just, you've got a system of finding out people's abilities within this area. Can we try this out on the audience?
We can try on the audience and listeners as well. If you extend the first finger of your dominant hand, whichever one you'd normally write with, and if you now, without thinking about it, trace a capital Q onto your forehead. And then just leave it right at the end there. And the key thing is where you put the tail of the Q.
Can you find out how many? Yeah.
We can. OK, so some of you will put it over the right eye, your right eye.
Have a look. Hands up.
So hands up if you put it over your right eye. OK. Hands down. Hands up if you put it over your left eye. Oh, not so many. OK.
That surprises me, but I'm very glad.
So if you're over your right eye, you're drawing the Q as if you yourself can see it. And so the argument is that you look at the world from your own perspective and you're a pretty honest person.
Wait, what?
You've probably worked out where this is going. If you did the Q with the tail over your left eye, then you're all thinking about the world as if someone else is looking at you. And so you tend to be a very skilled liar, dishonest, and immoral. So there we go. There's a little insight.
Anyway, so now we've been doing some deception on the audience. One of the great areas of professional sleight of hand is in the advertising industry, because we were told, our producer said, don't say they're liars, they might sue. Like the whole advertising industry is going to gather together and declare their honesty. What a wonderful moment that will be. So the question is, how do you lure people to your product? Now, David, you've just presented a documentary on Radio 4 for people who are listening now. They may have just heard it 20 minutes ago. Subliminal advertising. Yeah. Now, what did you find?
We made a documentary about subliminal advertising because it's one of these things that people are always talking about. It's always present. It's remarkable how long ago this was, if you like, kind of entered the culture, and yet how many people will still go on about subliminal advertising. They fundamentally believe that you can affect somebody's behaviour by giving them cues that they can't see and understand, and that will get people to do something. It's something that we call in the kind of conspiracy theory circles agency panic. It's about whether or not somebody will take control of you in some kind of a way or another. And one of the biggest of these was subliminal advertising. The idea, it came from the 50s, the idea that you could be sent a message during the middle, let's say, of a film, and somehow or other you would then act upon this message. It's a bit like a kind of a Manchurian candidate, except applied to purchasing and so on. So we decided, now there's a guy called Wolfgang Ströber, whom God protect, of Utrecht University, who has actually, under laboratory conditions, managed to make some kind of impact, which he says is statistically relevant, statistically significant, which suggests that you can actually, by flashing a word at a certain number of milliseconds, you can get them to take a message from you and under certain circumstances, controlled circumstances, act upon that message. And so what we have done with the audience here, a large section of them, is do precisely that thing earlier on, before the programme began.
So you showed them a film which said, "Kill Brian Cox," and then you left a load of crossbows outside.
As you
And we're
know,
going to find out the results by the end of the show.
As you know, it's the Queen of Hearts, which, when it's shown in a game of solitaire, sparks the murder. That's the story of the Manchurian Candidate. So essentially, we showed. The experimental group and the control group was shown, one was shown a film with the word Lipton's stuck in it several times. You can now see it on the screen behind us, where that was shown at an incredibly rapid pace. Now, some people can just about pick up they're being shown something, but very, very few would actually be able to read that. And we'll see from the results whether any actually did, and so on. We gave people the ability we gave them crisps so they'd feel a bit thirsty, because one thing that we already know is that unless people are already inclined towards the thing that you're doing, then in that case they're very, very unlikely to act upon it. And we found out whether or not putting that word up there made people who'd been eating crisps and who were offered a choice of drinks chose that drink.
Oh, we're going to find out now.
Yes, so I have the results in front of me. For all participants, the number of test group participants who picked Lipton Ice was 24 out of 52. So that means that's 46%. So it appears that nothing happened. It was entirely random. The number of the control group participants who picked Lipton Ice was 17 out of 46. It's 37%. Now, I think that there's no difference there. Because, I mean, the rule of thumb, isn't it? We talked, Richard, about the rule of thumb in these statistical tests is a so-called root n rule. So if you've got 50 people, you'd expect the number to be something plus or minus about 7, because 7 is about the square root of 50. So 17 plus or minus 7 or 8 to be consistent with a random distribution, wouldn't it?
I think that's right. I mean, psychologists would look at that and look at what's called the probability value associated with it and conclude there wasn't an effect. Or you might conclude there's a very small effect there, and if you had more and more people, you might get something interesting. But certainly on the face of it, the experiments didn't show that we should be worried about subliminals.
Which is a disaster, because I told the producer to get the iced tea on sale or return, but she didn't. So now we've got, I like the fact that the audience thought, what a lovely gesture, they've given us crisps. No, they were merely potato snacks of manipulation.
There was a so-called refined result. So there was another test done in which we removed any participants who strongly liked or disliked Lipton Ice.
Oh, poor people. Feels like eugenics based on soft drinks.
They were removed from the group. They weren't killed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they'd been removed.
Or who noticed the words, actually. So anyone who noticed that what the experiment was. And then the number of test group participants who picked Lipton Ice was 16 out of 30, so it's 53%, so no difference. And the number of the control group who picked Lipton was 17 out of 28, so 61%. So you
which actually, although it's not statistically significant, went the wrong way. And
I know you can't say that, because all you can say is it's not statistically significant.
Of course you can't. But using the point that Richard made earlier, that if you possibly extended the group out so it's huge enough, and assuming that you got the same result, actually you were getting the opposite result of a subliminal effect.
No, it's not statistically significant.
But it's not statistically significant.
If the effect were, if that negative effect were genuine, you'd actually sell more Liptons by not flashing it up on the screen.
They've been a brilliant sales company in the world.
Yes, they've been doing it for years. But it is curious, because you go to cinema, and on the way you'll pass huge billboards advertising things. Before the film, you'll see adverts. During the film, you'll explicitly see product placement some of the time. And for some reason, none of that worries us. It's the idea they might be putting up words in there. That's what I'm really worried about. So no, it didn't get an effect there.
Right, Sophie, What did you make of those results? Are they a surprise to you? I mean, it's not a particularly big sample, but...
No, I mean, it's very consistent with a lot of the work on this, that exactly as Richard said, we have a belief that it's a tremendously powerful way of getting ideas into our head, but it's not. The effects are weak and they're very variable and they're very affected by exactly how you do it and what people are expecting to happen.
David, you've written about conspiracy theories, voodoo histories, and are the conspiracy theories, are those senses, looking at that kind of idea of possible deception, is that another way of us trying to define that something is in charge? There is some structure that exists to give us greater pattern in the world, the things that have caused, whether it may well be 9/11, whether it may well be an assassination, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it sometimes seems to me that quite a lot of our existence is a kind of battle against chaos. Even the kind of structures of hallucinations can sometimes be an attempt to make order when your body's completely disordered and so on. I think that the same is true of conspiracy theories. I mean, there are lots of other things playing as well. The desire to be the one who knows the truth when other people don't. Sometimes there's a kind of political animosity or an ideological animosity against the person you think is the conspiracy theorist and so on, which makes you choose a particular conspiracy theory rather than another. But one of the things which is really interesting about it is the preference for a particular version of events that gives, if you like, a kind of higher order explanation that binds things together and which removes essentially contingency and chaos. Says there isn't such a thing as accident, there isn't such a thing as somebody making a mistake or a cock-up. It was all planned, somebody has it all in order. And as somebody once said, if you imply that there is a kind of evil agency that's organising everything bad, it does imply the possibility of a good agency that could organise it all for good somewhere out there. Maybe somewhere at the back of your head that possibility exists. Whereas the rest of us, most of the rest of the time, particularly as we get older, recognise the power of chaos and accident and things just bloody well happening.
Given that we are constantly lying to each other, being lied to and deceiving each other almost by the minute, is it not reasonable to believe that we're being deceived constantly?
Well, I think we are, but what we have to realise is the reason we can't detect lies is that that's really good for us. Because it's fine when someone's giving an exploitative lie, they're having an affair and they're not telling you or whatever, of course you'd want to know about that. But you don't know the rest of what they're thinking, about what they really think about you. And so it bonds us together. And there's an idea which is radical honesty therapy, which is you take couples and you say, no, just tell each other exactly what you think of one another, just for 24 hours. God. That's the end of every relationship. So it bonds us together. It's why we are bad at detecting lies. We should celebrate that, because without it, we wouldn't have a society, I don't think.
Who dreamt that up?
I was a German psychologist.
Lovely upbeat ending. So we will have now, we always ask our audience a question to get their take on the world, and today's question is, which fact do you wish was actually a lie? So here we are. The first one is Gravity by Julia, who is just up there. And,
it's a serious one. We know more about space than we do about the ocean.
Yeah, that is. We did. There was, Nigel Farage is not a comic creation. Still my favourite line, thinking of bizarre images. There was a lovely, I can't remember where they were, I think they were a UKIP member, and they said the problem with Britain nowadays is the homosexual machine is out of control. I thought, what a lovely image that is. It's kind of, it's over there, it's coming now. It's Escape from Bletchley Park, everyone down. Which fact you wish was actually a lie? That the moon landings were faked. Humans cannot travel at the speed of light, and nothing. A lot of people wanting to travel faster than the speed of light. They've obviously used the same Virgin train service that I used from Coventry the other day. So that'll have to be cut, though it did take bloody ages. At least they've got East Coast. Brilliant. I love suspense in travel, and now all sides are covered. Every single bit of train travel. Another Beckett play waiting to happen. So. Just thought I'd get that out of my system. I've been touring a very long time now. So, thank you to our panel, Professor Sophie Scott, Professor Richard Wiseman, and David Aranovich. 11 series in, and we still have people with different solutions to what the infinite monkey cage means. And today it's Emily Davidson. Dear beloved monkey cagers, I've come to the conclusion that the whole concept of caging a monkey depends on your definition of a monkey. If, say, we take monkey to mean all of the atoms that once made up a monkey, but now is a free gaseous format, this would be extremely difficult to cage. If we assume a cage that is infinite in any respect,
inspect other than volume, which we can since it's not explicitly stated, then there must be a boundary to the cage somewhere in space. And this is a problem for the concept of caging our theoretical monkey gas, since objects as large as buckyballs have been shown to appear on the other side of barriers due to quantum effects. One could create the cage out of a material that is sufficiently thick that this effect is supremely improbable, but there would still be a reasonable chance that some of the monkey atoms would end up inside the cage material, making it more of a monkey sponge than a monkey cage. Thank you very much. That was the Infinite Monkey Sponge. Goodbye.
In the infinite monkey cage.
Turned out nice again.
Welcome to the Infinite Monkey Cage. And to be fair, it's time to come clean because for the last 10 years now, we have actually been a vehicle for a shady group of evidence-based scientists and thinkers who, without people really noticing, have laid the foundations of our civilization, increased life expectancy beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams, and also paved the ways to the stars. So, sorry.
What's wrong with that?
That's exactly the kind of thing that I respect to come from a so-called scientist. And I call you a so-called scientist because you are a scientist. Anyway, look, it doesn't matter. But I think one of the sad things is that in our hurry as human beings not to die in agony covered in pustules, sometimes we've forgotten some of the other truths, by which I mean lies. Such as the moon's a spaceship, the Queen is a lizard, and Richard Madeley is actually a CIA spy plane operated by Roy Orbison and the Duchess of Kent. There he goes. I'm not even sure if you're the original Brian Cox. Because a real Brian Cox would have aged, wouldn't he?
Today, we are looking at conspiracy theories. In an age in which we have access to unprecedented amounts of information, in a society which rests firmly on the foundations of science, why are there apparently increasing numbers of people who believe that the moon landings were faked, that vaccines do not work, that the Earth is flat, and that climate science is a hoax? Should we simply dismiss conspiracy theorists as harmless idiots, or do we have to take the rise in conspiracy theories more seriously?
To enlighten us on this subject, we are joined by three people who claim to be a psychologist, a physicist and a comedian. And they are...
Hi, I'm Dr. David Robert Grimes. I'm a cancer researcher, physicist and science writer. I spend a lot of my time debunking conspiracy theories. I've just written a book on critical thinking called The Irrational Ape. And my favourite conspiracy theories are the idea that there's chemicals in the water to turn the frogs gay, that Finland is a myth, and the other one is that I'm part of an Illuminati conspiracy to make conspiracy theorists look silly. For A, they don't need help doing that, and B, I'm so incompetent I once stuck a drum cymbal into my own skull by mistake. So if they are using me as their point man, they're really scraping the barrel.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Douglas and I'm a professor of social psychology at the University of Kent. I've been studying conspiracy theories for about 10 years or so, and my favourite conspiracy theory is the flat earth conspiracy theory, only because if you're from Australia, which I am, the country is not supposed to exist.
Hello, my name is Shazia Mirza and I'm a comedian, and my utterly preposterous conspiracy theory is that I am Malala. And yeah, it's true, I got shot in the head and I'm now telling jokes scarily well, and sometimes I even bake cakes on Channel 4. And people approach me in airports and congratulate me on what I've done for girls' education. Also, there's other conspiracy theories that I like, that Jay-Z is a time-travelling vampire. But, you know, being Radio 4, you've probably never heard of Jay-Z. He's a rapper.
For the Radio 4 audience, that's JZ.
And this is our panel. Can I just say, I loved the gay frog thing is great. I read a book all about the different theories about what pop music could do from different kind of religious fundamentalist group, and apparently there was a group of Christian fundamentalists who found out that disco music made mice gay and that heavy metal music made pigs deaf. So you can add that to your list.
How many animals did they have to do these experiments on?
Just one pig, imagine that. There was no control pig listening to James Last or Mantovani.
Karen, the Royal Society's motto is nullius in verba, which is on nobody's word. So, which means scepticism is obviously a fundamental part of science. But what is the difference between a conspiracy theory and just sort of a reasonable scepticism?
Mm-hmm. Well, a conspiracy theory is usually defined as a secret plot by powerful people who are working in secret to achieve some kind of sinister goal. So you've already got quite a lot of things going on there. And typically with a conspiracy theory, there is not a lot of evidence. It's okay to be skeptical, it's okay to question, you can't accept all the information that you get all of the time. But with conspiracy theories, it tends to be information, layers and layers added on all the time, little bits peeled away, but constantly more layers being added, so that it's very, very difficult to kind of ever prove or disprove a conspiracy theory. So it's gone beyond healthy skepticism and it's become something a little less rational.
David, you're a physicist, but you now have spent a lot of time looking at conspiracy theories. Why did you move from physics into the world of conspiracy theories?
What started happening to me was I started writing about things like vaccination policy and things like climate change. And I started off on the ignorant assumption this is an information deficit problem, that you would go to people and say, oh, if people will be really happy if you just give them the information. And then you get your first screed of hate mail and people really angry at you. And you suddenly realize that this is a much more deeper, fascinating problem. And it really derails scientific discussion. If you're doing something on vaccination and someone keeps insisting that, no, it's all a cover-up, it is very hard to get them back on board. And that kind of fascinated me because with scientific conspiracy theories, if you can call them that, it's an oxymoron, I know. But if you can take something that is about science, it's an idea that scientists would have to be complicit. Getting scientists to agree is like herding cats. This idea that we could do this en masse is brilliant. So I got really interested in trying to play devil's advocate and show that this was a terrible idea. And that just made them hate me a lot more. I got an angry email from David Icke once. I mean, it's very, very hurtful.
But you came in from quite a serious angle because it was public health policy that you've been involved in.
Yeah. I mean, but it really has a massive effect. I mean, I don't want to make everyone miserable, but this year, the WHO said vaccine hesitancy was a top 10 threat to public health. We are looking at outbreaks of once nigh unconquered diseases, and this dark renaissance is largely driven by the fact that anti-vaccine disinformation and conspiracy theories are now propagated across social media. And we like to think that we're really savvy and that we can tell falsehoods from facts. We are useless at it. All the studies done on it show that even informed audiences are really bad at it, and we're on the back foot. And I think this is why probably we're doing the show on it tonight, because we are on the back foot and it's really starting to bite us.
And is that in terms of vaccines? I mean, for a lot of people listening to this, they probably think MMR would be the one that had the most kind of rumours and then conspiracy theories around it. But is it true that around the world it's different vaccines? It kind of often depends on kind of culture and certain kind of different ideologies.
100%. One of the bigger of the MMR is infamous here due to the Wakefield debacle, but in other countries it can be things like the HPV vaccine. In Japan, conspiracy theories about the HPV vaccine, which, by the way, prevents about 5% of all cancers worldwide, if properly administered, led uptake to fall from 70% to less than 1% within a year. In Denmark, it went from 79% to 17% within a year. And in Ireland, it went from 87% to 50% within a year. And thanks to a sustained effort from patient advocates and scientists and physicians, we've gone back up to the high 70s. But again, it turns on the culture and the society. The myths, however, are the exact same. That's fascinating. The vaccine might be different, but the claims made about them are unimaginative. They are recycled zombie myths that stagger on, even though they should have died years ago.
Karen, what's the motivation? Because we're going to discuss lots of conspiracy theories tonight, and some are kind of light-hearted, but this is an extremely serious problem. What's the motivation, or what do we know of the motivation behind such a conspiracy that the vaccination is bad? What are people seeing there that they think the problem is?
Well, in terms of the psychology of conspiracy theories, you find that people who are lower in critical and analytic thinking tend to be more attracted to conspiracy theories. People don't feel very powerful. They want to kind of regain a sense of power. Conspiracy theories might make them feel that this is possible. And in terms of social kind of motives, people who are more narcissistic, that kind of thing, they need to feel unique. They need to feel that they have possession of powerful knowledge that other people don't have, tend to be more driven toward conspiracy explanations than mainstream explanations as well.
Shazia, thinking of critical thinking, you studied biochemistry at university. Do you feel that did that give you, studying science, do you feel that you have when you sometimes do see certain kind of conspiracy theories or ideas that do seem to have a hint of the strange about them, do you feel more armed? Do you think you have a better way of dealing with them?
Well, my degree was in biochemistry, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. If I was in the lab and I blew something up, I thought I was doing really well, because I thought at least there's a reaction,
But it's biochemistry, so that means you were blowing living things up.
She was the one who made the frogs gay.
I mean, I shouldn't say that I blow things up, because it doesn't go well with me. So, stop accusing me, please, Brian. But I have to say, on behalf of all my people, because I am the leader of them, I did a degree in biochemistry, but it wasn't for bad things. I became a I was a science teacher afterwards, so I put it to good use, and I never harmed anybody, and I don't know who did 9/11. But they're looking at me like, I bet you do. No, honestly, we don't have one big brown WhatsApp group where we all know what's going on. It's gone all awkward in Radio 4 tonight, hasn't it? But yes, it's true. I did biochemistry, and the thing is, I also believe in God. And people say to me, you're so intelligent and you did biochemistry, how can you also believe in God? But, the thing with science is that, I know about the facts, and I've studied biochemistry, and I've done experiments and stuff, but sometimes when you also believe in God, sometimes faith is greater than the things that you see or you know or that you have been taught. Because that's what faith is. It's believing in the unseen, believing in the unknown, something greater than yourself. So sometimes you think, oh, you know what I know, but I also have faith, and my conscience, my instinct, coincidence, things like that make more sense to me than what I know. And so sometimes, although, we have these conspiracy theories, and some are based on fact and some are not, sometimes people just believe what they believe, and what they believe inside is far greater than what you present them with.
Is that a valid or a comparison that bears scrutiny? Is there an element of belief in conspiracy theories in the same way that we believe in many things? For example, as you said, a religious belief. Is there any correlation between those things? Are they similar or are they different?
Yeah, there is actually. A lot of studies have shown not a really large correlation, but a reasonably, small to medium correlation between religious belief and belief in conspiracy theories, as measured just, on scales of agreement. How much do you agree with this conspiracy, that conspiracy, another conspiracy theory? And also superstitious belief as well. So belief in luck, chance, all those sorts of things.
Astrology.
Yes, astrology. Those kinds of beliefs are also associated with belief in conspiracy theories as well.
I mean, you wrote the Irrational Ape. So it raises the question, I suppose, that whether humans are predisposed to believe things. I suppose that's one of the most basic questions that we're discussing tonight.
I think to pick up on what Karen was saying, the philosopher W.V. Quine talked about our web of belief. And this is the idea that we don't hold our beliefs in isolation. They're all interconnected. So if I can accept one thing, let's say I assume that climate change is a hoax, well, then I have to alter my beliefs on scientists and are they telling us the truth, and governments and everything else. So everything affects that. And if you create a hole in that web big enough to drive a truck through, it's not surprising that you tend to take other things on board. We see, for example, that if people who accept one conspiracy theory are incredibly likely to accept multiple ones. So I think that you can't look at your beliefs in isolation. We are not inherently rational beings. We like to pride ourselves that we are, but it's not intuitive to us. And we do have things, and I'm a huge fan of Karen's work. In fact, the academic high five that we've actually cited each other, but now I'm finally getting to meet her. So I'm going to butcher some of her work right now, and she can now correct me. But one of the things that I think is fascinating about this is that we all have this propensity towards motivated reasoning. Like, we hold a belief, and we want it to be true. And when we're presented with conflicting information, we have two options. We either adjust our belief or we deny it. And one of your papers, which is absolutely brilliant, was the one on conspiracy theorists who were given contradictory conspiracy theories. One which that Princess Diana had faked her own death, another one that she had been killed by the Queen. And people that believed in conspiracy theories could actually hold both of these things simultaneously. But it shows you that people want to believe. And I think there's a little narcissism in it too, because I'm sure you get the emails that I do. If you don't know anything, a conspiracy theory makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel like you know stuff. You can sit there and not believe in climate change and argue with people that know their stuff and have done PhDs and higher research degrees, and you still think you know more than them. And that must be a social factor that makes you feel good about yourself.
But with conspiracy theories, they often start off really big, like 9/11, Brexit, Bake Off. And, they start off really big, so people believe there must be a big explanation for this. There can't be something simple. So that's why people believe in these conspiracy theories, because they think there must be a big answer to something that was so big. True?
Yeah, that's definitely true. People just don't seem to be satisfied with a mundane, everyday kind of explanation like a car crash or, someone just died or whatever. It's just boring, right? So a large event requires a large explanation. And there's studies that support that particular hypothesis.
Because it helps people make sense of what happened.
Well, it means it's also just one thing, as opposed to all the random, as you were saying, as opposed to all the random things you go, we're being controlled. It's like when Neil Armstrong died, and I was just tweeting about the fact that I wondered how long it would be before someone was kind of going, they've killed him now because he was just about to reveal the truth. It's weird, isn't it? Why would an old man die? I can't wait, that. And someone immediately went, you're late. 2 minutes after that, they started saying, that's why they've killed him. That's why they've killed the old man who's been ill for a while. They've killed him because he was about to say we didn't actually go there.
Yeah. Do you think that will happen to Prince Andrew?
Do you know what? It's going to be so fun to see what makes the edit after it's gone to the radio. Ombudsmen. I'm very excited by this because we don't know. This doesn't go out for a month. We don't know what's going to happen in between. Let's see how your powers of prescience have. But I think
there's an interesting. We've been talking about this word belief, right? And in this context, I suppose, conspiracy theories, we're saying it is a bad thing. It's a negative thing. You just believe stuff. But there's also, of course, belief, as you mentioned, that belief is a part of our society and a part of what it means to be human. So how do we separate those two versions of belief, or can we separate those two versions of belief?
I think that the real problem with conspiracy theorists is that when you show them information that undermines their hypothesis, they refuse to take that on board. In fact, they'll bend reality around it, like some kind of warping effect on reality space-time. And one of the things, that's a real problem, because we can't live in a world where we can't agree on basic facts. So we can all hold our beliefs, and you can talk about Stephen Jay Gould, his non-overlapping magisteria, and these things that you can have religious belief, and it doesn't really impact, apart from your own faith, your day-to-day interpretation of the world for the most part. But if you believe that, say, 9/11 was an inside job, that entirely shapes how you're going to interpret everything else. And if someone gives you evidence that undermines that and you refuse to accept that evidence, I think the old Paul Simon line, all lies in jest, still the man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest, that's a serious problem. And the more we curate our own news sources, the more that we go online and we decide we don't have to read the whole newspaper, we just cherry pick the articles that tell us what we want to hear, the bigger problem that's going to become, and the more polarized we become.
Beliefs can be contagious, because, one person believes something and then they can talk to other people about it. And because of social media, somebody can just put something out there on Twitter and it can be another way of thinking for other people. And they'll go, I never thought of that. Yeah, maybe 9/11 was an inside job. Nobody's put that theory forward before. And so a belief can be contagious. It can help other people think another way, even if it's right or wrong.
But isn't part of the problem is because there is now so much information that the idea, I believe in things you've told me. I've never actually seen you do the double slit experiment, this whole thing of behaving as a wave and a particle, really? What's he really trying to get out of me? $9.99, HarperCollins. But it's kind of that thing where I do, but that's the thing, isn't it? Which is nearly everything, because we have such a huge body of information, such an enormous amount of communication with such a large number of people, that you do have, it's about whittling down, why would I trust that opinion and why do I not trust that opinion?
But then a lot of people will go online and they'll be looking for a specific type of information as well. So if you're inclined toward a particular conspiracy theory, if you've read it before and you think, well, that's interesting, then you'll go and search for that information, but you won't look for information that refutes that conspiracy theory. So then you'll end up in a little information bubble, echo chamber, whatever it is, where you only consume information that confirms your conspiracy theory, and you won't be able to reach outside. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen for people who don't believe the conspiracy theory either. I think we all live in our echo chambers on various issues. But I think that because there is so much information out there, people who are inclined toward a conspiracy theory can very, very easily find it and then reinforce it, and the attitudes become more stronger, more polarized. Small communities of people become large communities of people, and then you have a movement.
Yeah, I was going to ask what makes a good one?
Well,
what
Flat
makes
Earth,
it
why? That's the one that I wanted to know. Is with both of us, when we were travelling around on tour at one point, that was when Flat Earth seemed to suddenly become, and because we're travelling around as well, you suddenly go, Flat Earth. How has that become, in the 21st century, something which is not just discussed, which seems like it must have started as a prank. That's all you can believe.
Yeah, but it's now a successful one.
Yeah.
So what makes a successful and persistent conspiracy theory?
YouTube.
Yeah, the internet. Flat Earth, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that quick question. To be honest, this is something I would really, really like to do. I think that there are must be some features of conspiracy theories that mean that they stand the test of time, while others kind of just die away. I don't know what the answer to that is, and I don't know why the Flat Earth conspiracy theory is suddenly a thing again. I was looking at the website today, and I still just cannot get my head around this.
I've seen pictures of the Earth, and they're round.
But you see, that's the thing. This is a bit like David was saying. That's because when you do start the argument, it turns out you have to then decide a lot of other things aren't true. No one's been into space. Because all of those images are also not true. Shadows are somehow a lie. Somehow, all of these, and it has to be. I mean, I know, in fact, David, you wrote about this in your book. We're going back a long time. There was I don't think it was a boom of flat Earth belief, but Alfred Russel Wallace, the great scientist and co-founder really of the idea of natural selection, he got caught up in a flat Earth debate, didn't he?
He did, and he made the classic dumb error: never choose your battles. It's a very important thing when you're going to argue with something, be it Flat Earth or Brexit. Choose your battles, because some people aren't going to listen to you. And Alfred Russel Wallace did this the really bad way. He answered an ad that said a flat earther wanted to basically, he prove to me that the world is rounded, and he went and did this, and he did it the same way you do it now. He showed deflection, curvature, and all that kind of stuff. He never got his money. In fact, he got death threats, and he had to eventually get this guy put in jail who went after him. He learned a very important lesson. There's a level of delusion underneath some of these beliefs as well. And one of the really tragic examples, I guess, that we have now is the targeted individuals community. And this is the self-reinforcing echo chambers. Targeted individuals believe that they are being stalked by the government. They're being gang stalked. And years ago, if you said that in public, people would think you had a delusional disorder, because you probably did. Now they find communities of similar-minded people, and they all get together, and they say, don't speak to anyone else, just speak with us. And in doing so, they reinforce their belief. And that has led to tragic consequences. The Navy Yard shooting in Washington was a guy who thought he was a targeted individual trying to communicate with other people. When we're in echo chambers, we reinforce really bad beliefs as well.
It's also not logical, because why would all the people who think the government's telling get together at a conference and advertise? I mean, anyway.
But it's illusory. It's the phenomenon of illusory truth as well. And we are all susceptible to this, by the way. If you hear repeated falsehoods, you might think that you're very discerning, but that actually, there's research that indicates that affects your belief itself. You start affording it more weight because you've heard it from repeated sources. Napoleon famously said that there is only one figure in all of rhetoric worth a damn, and that was repetition. And there's a degree of truth in that. If you repeat something often enough, even if you know it's false, you start ascribing it more truth value. So YouTube, yes, is the problem.
And that's what's happened with Trump. He just keeps repeating lies, and people
Big
are
lie
believing
theory,
it.
yeah.
In psychological terms, so you mentioned already that there are particular character types that can be identified that make a person more susceptible to a conspiracy theory. In that case, is there a way is there a way that education, for example, can make people less susceptible to conspiracy theories, or is it actually just a character type that finds it rather more difficult to, I suppose, as David said, difficult to change their mind when confronted with evidence? Is that inherent, or is it about education?
Well, I think there's a bit of both going on there, to be honest. I think a lot of psychological research would suggest that there are certain personality characteristics and certain demographic factors as well, which attract people toward conspiracy theories. But education is actually one of the most consistent predictors of belief in conspiracy theories. More educated people are much less likely to take on new conspiracy theories, believe old conspiracy theories, anything.
And what's the measure there that you're using? Just qualifications, degree?
Yeah, usually just level of education from no formal education to, PhD.
You do have huge exemptions from that, though. For example, anti-vaccine beliefs tend to correlate strongly with being middle class, because only a middle class person would be arrogant enough to think more than they know. Then all doctors are lying to them and they know more because they went to their chakra person 2 weeks ago. But that's absolutely a huge factor. But
that's what we meant by demographic. So this is interesting, isn't it? Because I'm aware that the discussions such as this can sound rather smug, for example, because it's people saying, well, those people are silly and they believe silly things.
I am very smug in my defense, Brian.
But in fact, as you say, that it is interesting that the so-called middle class, I suppose you mean sort of professional, relatively well-educated
that, by the way, just for the Radio 4 audience.
Well, in a sense, the Radio 4 audience, what you're saying is statistically more people listening to Radio 4 may well be anti-vaxxers because they fall into that particular demographic.
If you look at the outbreak of in America, you have it's upper class communities having measles outbreaks because they got they decided to get exemptions from vaccine systems, and they could afford to go to the doctors to get these certificates. They are the ones that perpetuate the most anti-vaccine misinformation online. I don't want to. Obviously, education is a massive factor, but there's also arrogance as well that has to be factored into that too.
I was just going to say the correlation between education and conspiracy belief is stable, but it's relatively small. And so there are loads of other factors, including demographic factors like age and income, which of course is correlated with education. But there's a lot of things going on there.
In terms of age, by the way. So age, what's the correlation? Sorry, Robin will ask that question. He's younger than me, Robin.
Welcome to this remake of Steptoe and Son by the Open University.
Is there a portrait of him aging somewhere?
Older people tend to believe conspiracy theories less. There are some very small pockets of research that have attempted to intervene on conspiracy beliefs. We've done some research ourselves where we've tried to give people the kind of correct information about the anti-vax movement, actually, and find that if you give people this information after they've already learned about the conspiracy theory, then their attitudes don't change and they still believe the conspiracy theory. But if you, I guess, inoculate them beforehand with the correct information and then give them the conspiracy theory, it's much less powerful. But practically, that's not very easy to do because, as we know, when something bad happens, a conspiracy theory is often just there on Twitter within 2 minutes. And there have been another couple of strategies as well, like using humour and ridicule. Even works in doesn't sound very nice, but it's been found to work.
So you can ridicule, but you have to pick your target. So for vaccine hesitancy, for example, the vast majority of parents that don't vaccinate their children are actually not anti-vaxxers, they're victims of anti-vaxxers. Vaccine hesitancy is a spectrum, and if you hear scary stories, we have the availability heuristic. We remember scary stories, and in remembering them, they affect our choices. So there's only a very small vocal core of anti-vaccine activists that can make other people not vaccinate. Now, they're the ones that deserve ridicule, not necessarily the parents who don't vaccinate. You can reach them. Although there was a study done in California in 2014 that found that you could You could reach some parents who are hesitant, but the more you tried to reach anti-vaxxers, the hardcore, mendicious kind of cohort of that, the more firmly entrenched in their beliefs they became. You actually, they call that the backfire effect sometimes. And it's a really bizarre thing. So you're wasting your efforts trying on that core, but there's much better places that we can concentrate our efforts. We'll never stop conspiracy theories. We can just maybe, like a prophylactic against them, we can kind of have like a skepticism condom that people can't get infected with these weird beliefs, but it has to happen before. You're absolutely right, it has to happen before rather than after.
Well, Shir, do you think there are ways of arming yourself when you are, in this world that we were saying, where you've just got so many different points of information coming at you? Do you think there are a set of rules where you think, hang on a minute, let's just have a look at this. How can I decide the veracity of this piece of information?
Well, like David said, it depends on intelligence and education and imagination and all those things that come from being an intelligent person, really, that come from education. I mean, otherwise you just believe everything that everybody tells you. I mean, when I was a teacher, obviously I encouraged critical thinking, but some of the kids, they just didn't want to think. So if they don't want to think that way, you can't force them to think that way. That has to come from them.
Well, we have a question to the audience. What is the strangest thing that you have ever believed? Brian Cox ages like normal humans. That's from Rebecca. You called him human, though. Your first conspiracy theory error. He is a replicant.
Has Brian ever had Botox?
No, we just swap the heads.
Really?
Yeah, he comes out formaldehyde. I shake it. I wipe it down with an old J cloth, pick the little bits of blue thread off, and then we put him out. He goes, "I'm a real boy."
Here's one, though, related. There are some people who can't sweat.
One sock of every pair turns into a coat hanger between the washing machine and the wardrobe.
It says, I used to believe that div B equals 0. Well, it does.
Oh.
So there are no magnetic monopoles. That's why it's one of Maxwell's equations. It's correct. That's the joke. See,
according to my granddad, there are special trees for planting along bus routes that grow with the shape for the buses to fit through. I like that. My dad told me the hazard warning button in his car was an ejector seat, and I believed him for years because of his fanciful yet convincing account of when he used it. I love that. What brilliant dads you've got. These are. What have you got, Brian? You got any more? You've done with that?
I've just got one more. Stupidity travels faster than the speed of light.
So thank you very much to Karen Douglas, David Robert Grimes and Shazia Mirza. Next week we are investigating coral reefs. Don't forget, by the way, if any of the conspiracy theories we've discussed today have affected you, well, that's kind of how we want you to feel. But we have set up a helpline. We're not going to give you the number because we'll call you because we know who you are. Good night.
Turn that nice again.
Hello, I'm Professor Brian Cox, CBE FRS.
I'm Robin Ince, PCW, which means I am a Pointless Celebrities winner twice over. Just so you know, one of my greatest answers was Alderney, another was Eve Ferret. Anyway, and this is the Infinite Monkey Cage. Now, human beings have a habit of always living in the worst time possible. The past is a place of rosy nostalgia where old women would unicycle to communion, balancing a pint of beer on their head, and the future is a place where we've all moved to a luxury centre park on Mars. The only time that's rubbish is the present, which tragically is where we always have to live. Now, in the 21st century, it seems popular to believe that this century is where the human species jumped the shark. After decades of reason and progress, we became a world of crackpots and conspiracy theorists. Even Brian, in fact, this is, you won't believe, he is not immune to crazy pseudoscience, right? The other day, he was telling me, this is, right, basically, he told me that one particle could go through 2 slits at one time, right? But typically being a pseudoscientist, he then went, oh, but only if you're not looking. What a crank.
You see, here's the problem with creating shows that are balanced. If indeed you should balance drivel. For 13 years now, I've attempted to present a science show celebrating the most remarkable strides we've made as a species in understanding the deep structure of nature and the majesty of the heavens, while sharing the stage with a man who doesn't understand interference phenomena.
Trying to explain why people believe weird things to Brian is like, for instance, people who believe that the Earth is flat is like talking to Mr. Data, basically, in Star Trek, because his brain implodes. You just get to go, do not understand. People make decisions based on emotion, not facts and equation. What is love?
Today, we're looking at how we come to believe ideas about the world that go against all the evidence and how we twist the evidence to fit with what we want to believe. Has conspiratorial thinking changed as our worldview has changed, shaped as it is by the new scientific discoveries and new philosophical movements that shape our world?
Joining us to discuss this are a philosopher, a zoologist, a social psychologist, and a writer who reacted to not understanding a lecture by Brian Cox by writing a play all about it, which I felt was a bit extreme. But anyway, they are...
I'm Professor Matthew Cobb at the University of Manchester, and I think the most interesting conspiracy theories are those that are true, like the conspiracies by big business to make us believe that tobacco wasn't harmful to health, or that there was a problem about the overwhelming majority view that there is climate change and it's anthropogenic.
My name is Timotheus Vermeulen. I'm a professor of media culture and society at the University of Oslo in Norway. And the oddest conspiracy theory I heard it the other day when I was in a German town called Bielefeld, is that Bielefeld does not exist.
My name's Karen Douglas, and I'm a professor of social psychology at the University of Kent. And one of the strangest conspiracy theories I've come across, also relatively recently, is that the Disney Corporation released the film Frozen deliberately to change Google's algorithm so that when people searched for Disney Frozen, they no longer came across information about Walt Disney having been cryogenically frozen.
I'm David Baddiel, and I once said that conspiracy theory is how idiots get to feel like intellectuals, and I think that was borne out by the Flat Earth Society, someone from the Flat Earth Society did once say that they were a very respectable society who had members all around the globe.
This is our panel.
Matthew, it does feel at the moment as if we're in a world where the facts that underpin our civilization, so science, is under attack, and it often feels like it's under attack like never before. But is that really the case?
Well, I think there's obviously been an amplification through social media and through mass communication of many of the more interesting ideas. But I think this goes way, way back and has always been with us. Francis Crick used to get letters from strange people, and he would write on them, "File under madmen," and then they would all be put in the filing cabinet along with all the other crazed ideas about the origin of the universe and so on. Newton, somebody who you would admire, I'm sure, and his laws of motion enable us to put satellites around Jupiter, but at the same time, because there were things he didn't understand, that he was groping to try and understand how the universe worked through what we would now call alchemy. He thought that metals were alive, and indeed that in some way the universe was alive too, and he was searching for the philosopher's stone, which would be a way of turning base metals into gold.
So, like Harry Potter?
Exactly like Harry Potter. That's where it comes from. It's all about, it's actually a whole conspiracy, all Harry Potter films, conspiracy to get over Newtonian mechanics. Well, that's what all the flying
But I find that fascinating with Newton as well, the fact that he basically didn't think that his laws of motion, he thought they were very much they were okay. But his huge work on the Book of Daniel from the Bible, that was what people would remember him for. Well, no one would care about gravity.
Well, they'd care if you could find a way of turning base metals into gold, and you'd get very rich. But of course, the government was very worried about this. This was something that affected chemists throughout the 17th and 18th centuries as they tried to turn base metals into gold, that what would then happen to the value of the currency. It would collapse if all of a sudden this turned out to be not proper gold that had been mined in Peru or wherever, but was in fact this kind of weird gold that somebody had made in a laboratory somewhere in Europe.
What I find, I've only just realised, you telling that now, that must be the reason they made him the head of the Royal Mint, because he was the head of the Royal, so they saw him as a kind of Rumpelstiltskin character who would just say, brilliant, we'll get Newton on our side and he'll just be weaving all this gold for us. How's it going? Is it not as well as I'd hoped?
So basically, Newton just thought the physics as a hobby. Is that right?
No, I think his physics and what we would call his alchemy were part of the same way of understanding the universe. It's just that one of them was better and more accurate and more predictive, and we've retained it, than the other stuff, which slowly, it did transmute, but not into gold, but into chemistry by the end of the 18th century. But some of the ideas, they now look crazy to us. They look like they should be filed under madmen. Metals aren't alive. The universe isn't alive, but that was his way of trying to deal with something that he couldn't understand.
And Tim, if we come to the 20th century and through the 21st century, so the way that we think about facts, the way that we think about the world is mirrored and intertwined with philosophy. So could you outline the philosophical movements that we see as we move through the 20th century into the 21st century?
Yeah. So, and I'm sure some of the audience know this, and this is a very crude explanation of a kind of a categorization that is far more complex and far more broad, so I'll surely miss out on some things. But generally speaking, there is this thing called modernity, and this is all the industrial processes, but what we associate modernity with these days is this idea of progress at all costs. Regardless of whether this was scientific progress or political progress, all kinds of progress, and you're willing to, I guess, sacrifice everything in order to achieve that, right? And so if we think of modernity, which is the late 19th, early 20th century, we think of enthusiasm and absolutism, but we also think, and this is quite important, we think of the tragedies and the terror and the catastrophes that emerge as a result, right? So the Enlightenment ends in the French Revolution with Saint-Just throwing everyone under the guillotine. Communist Russia, pogroms, and so on and so forth. So all of these projects for progress end up in disaster. And so what postmodernism then is, which is the kind of the dominant register of experience that follows from that is not singular, but the dominant register of experience that follows roughly after the Second World War, is people saying, oh dear, this went quite terribly. Let's not do this, right? Let's not tell each other these huge stories that explain everything. Let's instead assume that we need to take them apart. That would be the leftist, the progressive kind of postmodernism. Or let's assume that there's only one ideology or one grand narrative left in the boxing ring. And this is Francis Fukuyama, who said that it's America, which was convenient because he was American. And so, but the right and the left, whether you say America is where it's at, or whether you say we should not tell these big stories, we should take them apart and show that patriarchy here, capitalism, and so on and so forth, both of them imagine an end of the future, right? This is it, they say. Let's not go there. Let's not do those things anymore. And in Britain, I think it's called TINA.
Sorry, in Britain it's called what?
TINA.
TINA?
There's no alternative.
Really? I've never heard. Do you know that? Because I just thought you were talking about someone called Tina.
Yes. I was doing both at the same time. Yeah. But also, I was talking about Margaret Thatcher's notion of there's no alternative.
Okay.
And so this eternal present, postmodernism, works really well. It's called a holiday from history also. And then suddenly you have a generation, I guess my generation, the one next after that, that is taught, or has always sort of been raised and been taught those principles at school, that, there's just your opinion and so on and so forth. And then the world appears to fall apart, right? Climate change, political upheaval, enormous economic inequality, socioeconomic inequality. And so they are like, oh dear, what do we do now? And so how do you build a new future, and how do you establish new truths to get you out of this moment without having the tools to do that? There's this artwork, a very famous artwork by the Lebanese-American artist Annabelle Daou, and she has this piece that's called Which Side Are You On?, in which she asks people in the gallery which side they are on. And you understand immediately listening to it that they don't know. They have no idea what to say, right? They'll joke or they'll be very serious, but they don't really know where to go with that. And I think the reason is that they understand, like most of us do, that there's no one side that is definitely better than the other, right? You can't really make that choice, right? I don't know. It's also an open question. So if I say Arsenal and someone else says human rights, you feel like a terrible human being for having just said Arsenal. I mean, maybe generally.
That's not a fixture I'm aware of, though. Is that the Europa League?
It's the only league the Europeans still play.
Right.
If you're this captain on a ship, that's the model, by the way, for postmodernism in philosophy. A captain on a ship moving between islands, but never going onto one island, but keep moving between them. what do you do when the ship sinks? And so I think this question, is this meta-modern question, and apparently it's just putting stuff together and hope for the best.
Yeah, you can see, Karen, how this poses a challenge to a scientific worldview. Just the idea, as you said, that you can alight on many different islands. You can't, right? If you're talking about just very simple scientific ideas like the Earth is spherical, and we're going to get to that conspiracy theory later. So can it, as you described, Tim, this move from, I suppose, you're talking about celebrating progress, I suppose, 19th century, simply speaking, so a celebration of science to a more distrustful society.
But yeah, I think it is true. A lot of people in my line of work are saying that we are living in this kind of society where people are trusting science much less than they used to. They're trusting the experts a lot less, and instead they're trusting information that their auntie has told them, or that somebody has come across on the internet. And so the science kind of matters less than the information that you can kind of just find yourself by looking here, there and everywhere. And that's kind of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in why people will opt for these sorts of explanations that they will find that aren't particularly factually based, or information that they've just found somewhere or someone's told them about, rather than information that is derived from science. So I'm interested in the psychology of conspiracy theories and why people will go for these sorts of explanations as opposed to scientific or more rational explanations.
So I think the reason why people believe in conspiracy theories at heart is because it's reassuring. And it's reassuring because the world is in fact full of random, a quantum physicist can tell you this, the world is full of very random, accidental stuff. And it's very hard to process. And so it's simpler just to think that there is a force or a number of forces that you, or only you, and your mates on undiscovered.com have managed to crack a code that you've cracked that sorts out the world. And even if that's evil, it's more reassuring to think that there are people in control, there are shadowy forces, I say people, they could be lizards, in control, than the idea that the world is generally random. Speaking personally, I once saw an American comedian, and I don't remember this guy's name, which is really bad of me, because I've quoted this quite a lot, but it's an important thing from my point of view, which is, when he came on stage, he just said, "I blame the Jews, it's quicker that way." And the thing is that the reason that Jews are so often, and almost every conspiracy theory does end up with this idea of the Jews, is that really the Jews are just stand-ins for the idea of a kind of superior force that's somehow evilly controlling the world. And although it leads to genocide, at some level, what the people want who imagine that is that that force is there because it comforts them. It comforts them and makes them think that life is not just completely random and accidental.
But that's, David, what I find interesting about that, and I wouldn't disagree at all, is it doesn't seem to bring happiness.
No.
I very rarely, if I've ever ended up in an argument with a flat earther, with a moon hoaxer, with someone who doesn't believe, that Joe Biden won the election, I never see them appearing to be cock-a-hoop. They always seem to be furious as well. Yeah. So that's what I find fascinating, is this, it is both comforting and seems to make people utterly infuriated all the time.
Yeah, because comfort, what I mean by comforting is it's more about identity and having a stable identity about yourself than it is about any idea of happiness. And the reason why I think that it's grown a lot over the last 15 years is, of course, social media is a marketplace of identity. Social media is not a marketplace of ideas. It's a marketplace of identity. It's about broadcasting who you are. And what's the best way of broadcasting who you are? It's, I believe this. And often, if you believe something extreme, then you're turning up the volume on your identity.
Yeah, with the social media, I'm also thinking, right? So if we all agree that conspiracy theories, they reoccur throughout history, but they're more common or more prevalent at moments of crises, it also seems to me that you mentioned social media, we can also go back to the advent of modernity and cinema, right? Where we also see a momentary rise in conspiracy theories. It also seems to me that the medium or the medium specificity is quite important, right? In early film philosophy, there's always this distinction between the theater and film. Right? And in the theater, you have a kind of a physical closeness, right? If I would now fall and break my leg, and one of you was a doctor, I think hopefully you'd feel responsible to jump on stage and help me out, right? So there's kind of a physical, we're in it
This
together.
is England. They'd be too embarrassed. They'd want to get up, but they go, well, what if he's just sprained and then he stands up just as I get there and then, oh, God, no. Let him writhe in agony for an hour or two yet.
What if also, some people in here might be thinking, what if it was a false flag? What if it wasn't real? What if it's all part of the BBC trying to control the world, his broken leg?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I hope at least that we will be in it together, right? There's a kind of a physical presence. There's a kind of an access we have to each other. At the same time, there's a distance, right? We're sitting here. We have also loads of space, and you're all sitting there with less space, right? Quite cramped. There's a kind of distance as well. Whereas with cinema, of course, if you sit in the theater and someone on stage falls, I mean, it's insane, right? You can't help that person with their broken leg, right? There is that kind of epistemic distance. You're no longer in the same world in a way. However, because of close-up and repetition and so on, you do get more of a sense of closeness, right, of intimacy. So it's a simultaneous kind of closeness or intimacy and not having to bear that immediate responsibility, or it's kind of an ethics of being together, which also allows you, I suppose, to go about it in a very different way, right? And so if you go from cinema, where you're still with loads of people, to television, where you're just with your family on the sofa, I guess, to then social media, when you're on your own in your bed with your phone, or on the loo, whatever, you create those very different kind of relationships of intimacy and distance in a way. So the ethics change entirely, which seems to me quite beneficial, if that's the word, for the emergence of more, or the popularity of conspiracy theories.
But the root, I mean, I think I would contest your suggestion that it's the root of conspiracy theories is to do with changes in modernity or whatever. And I think the example of, say, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is, a fake conspiracy theory cooked up, but then consumed by people from the late part of the 19th century onwards, demonstrates that this is to do with, as David said, other social factors of uncertainty and fear, and holding on to something that explains something that is otherwise incomprehensible. And now, clearly we've been going through a very interesting last 20 years with an awful lot of things. It does seem as though history has sped up. I'm not sure that's true, but that's the feeling you've got. And so maybe that, as well as the social media, is helping to explain why there is the explosion of increasingly crackpot ideas.
But I think the modernism thing is interesting, because I think the other thing that's very important with conspiracy theory is story, is narrative. We are the only animal that really has narrative, and we constantly try and create stories out of our lives. Again, that's an illusion. Life doesn't really have narrative. It's just a series of random events. But if we create narrative, then we can create narratives of, here's a thing that's gone wrong, but I know how to bring it to justice. And that's an arc, right? And it provides a kind of satisfaction in people's minds. And so the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is that. It's a story. It's a story about villains controlling the world, that the conspiracy theorist is then the hero because they've cracked that code. Now, none of that is true, but story allows us to make sense of the world.
I was just going to chip in on the issue of social media consumption as well. And of course, I think that it has really changed how people can communicate and find conspiracy theories and other types of odd beliefs, if you want to use that word. But it helps people to find like-minded individuals, which relates to the issue that you mentioned about identity. Finding groups of people who agree with you and with whom you agree. At the same time, it also allows you to filter out information that you don't agree with, you don't want to listen to. So it's a way that people can preserve a niche or unusual belief, because they can just ignore other pieces of information. So people become, I guess, consumed in these particular groups or information bubbles or whatever you want to call them. And it's a way of holding on to the belief by basically ignoring what anybody else has to say. You can just tunnel your information consumption in a particular direction and just keep it there.
Yeah, I wanted to just on the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, just because that was brought up, and this seems to me an interesting thing, which is, as far as I know, that was debunked quite quickly, and they even found the root of it actually came from a fiction originally, was turned into supposed. So even though it's been debunked, people somehow seem to have and I'm interested in the psychology of being able to say, I know this isn't true, but it doesn't mean it's not true, which seems to be what is going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are very, very good at rationalizing their beliefs, and they think, well, this isn't, maybe I've not come across any evidence to say this is true, but I also haven't come across any evidence to say that it's not. And people, if they do believe something which may be kind of wrapped up in various different prejudices, they are very, very good at protecting those beliefs and coming up with strategies to be able to, I guess, shield themselves from other types of information. And one tool that conspiracy theorists use quite a lot is accusing anybody who says otherwise that they're in on the conspiracy. They're part of the giant conspiracy themselves.
That happened to me when I did a documentary about Holocaust denial that was on BBC Two a little while ago, and I spoke to a Holocaust denier, and I said to him at one point, so all these, like my family, large section of my family was murdered by the Nazis. So I said, so where are they? Right? If they weren't murdered by the Nazis, why haven't they come and seen me by now? Right? Well, where are they? It's really nasty that they just haven't come out and said, no, it was all a lie. Come on, let's have tea. They're not doing that. And I said, so where are they? And he said, you tell me. Meaning, you're a Jew, so you obviously know. He also said at one point, because it was a BBC documentary, that he didn't trust me anyway because Jews run the BBC. And I said, well, I promise you, if I was running the BBC, I'd be on it a lot more. But as you say, that none of this made any difference to him. Absolutely none of it. I could have joked, I could have said logical stuff. It was all just grist to the mill of, well, obviously I'm right because you're on the conspiracy, as you say.
I love the fact that what you have to do now is you have to carry a briefcase of all of your rejected TV projects to prove your point. 20 years of rejected plays, everyone a masterpiece.
Tim, it's easy to see this arc of philosophy that you described, from modernism, postmodernism, then to metamodernism. It's easy to map that onto a rise in conspiracy theory. I mean, I know nothing about philosophy at all. So I would tend, when you say the word postmodernism, I tend to think that it almost feels to me like an anti-intellectual movement. So you can correct me on that, in the sense that everything becomes possible. There are no real facts that we can hang on to. So is that, I'm sure you're going to say it's a gross oversimplification, and my question is it a gross oversimplification? But also whether the philosophical tides make space for people to say, well, I have an opinion that the Earth is not going around the sun, or I don't like these vaccines, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. To the extent that I don't think, and I'm sure that there are many people who associate with or who think of themselves as postmodern thinkers or whatever, that they would deny the very existence of truth. But the way I've always understood it is more that there is an emphasis on the contextual nature of truths. So something is true here, but not necessarily there. That is not to say that it isn't also true there, but to assume as much would be tricky. And so I think for postmodernism, it's very much about that understanding of having the contextuality of a truth. However, I do think, and we see that now, that it also allows the liberty for a kind of radical taking apart of the very idea that there is a truth at all. And so I think that postmodernism allows to question every single truth. It is just that now that suddenly the world doesn't seem so certain, but you're bringing up other truths just sort of from the gut.
There is a difference, though, between questioning truths, which you might call skepticism, which lies at the heart of science. But there's something you said, that the idea that what is true over here is not true over there. That really does go to the heart of science, in that it's fundamental that what is true here is true over there. The chemistry that exists on Earth is the chemistry that exists in the distant stars.
Yeah.
So that does seem to run counter to the basic foundations.
Except it's not, Brian, is it? Sorry.
Yes, it is.
Well,
it is.
I'm going to posit something to you, which is that relativity suggests that what is true over here is not true over there.
No. There's a logical.
Oh, I've got him.
No, you haven't. No, you've the opposite of got me.
Oh, okay.
No. Relativity is a very well-defined mathematical theory. It is true across the universe.
No, I'm not saying that relativity isn't true, but the relative speed of something is different, or the relative, depending on where the person is, or the train is, or where they are, or the light. All that is different.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, no, you're talking nonsense in a very deep sense. However,
okay.
you do raise an interesting point, because it was...
This is like a Radio 3 programme, isn't it? Not many will listen, but they will be greatly inspired.
Because it does raise this idea. This idea. I mean, so relativity was taken, as was quantum mechanics, as a part of that movement that led apparently to the undermining of certainty in science, that the world is not clockwork anymore. That's a misreading of the science, actually. But maybe Matthew would
I think that this perhaps reveals philosophy's interest in the wilder realms of physics. And if you think about what's happened in biology since the Second World War, rather than us losing our way, quite the opposite. We have understood life down to the most exquisite molecular level. We can manipulate it in all sorts of ways. Our understanding of genetics has completely transformed our understanding of evolution, of physiology, of everything, medicine. So in a way, I mean, it seems to me like, philosophy is going over there and biology is steaming ahead, still stuck in the old onward to a glorious future modernist view that you've said is kind of out of fashion.
Well, that's what I wondered, Karen, about, how true is it? We started off by talking about this, that are conspiracy theories more rife? Is part of that because the universe has become more certain and we are surrounded by information? So, as David was saying, this idea of trying to find some certainty becomes more desperate when you have so many possibilities.
Well, I think that some people would argue that conspiracy theorizing, this way of thinking, has always been with us. So evolutionary psychologists would say that this is just a natural way that we deal with situations where there could be potentially a hostile group who is trying to, do something bad towards us, as a kind of safety or survival mechanism. And I guess you can trace conspiracy theorizing back a long, long way. So I think that they have always been with us. But I think one of the reasons why we're seeing so many more of them now, apart from perhaps use of social media and just the ease with which we can find this information now, is that particularly in the last couple of years, we've just all been dealing with a horrendous crisis situation. And a situation like the pandemic has just been absolutely fertile ground for conspiracy theories. It has all of the necessary ingredients. You have situations of uncertainty. People feel that they're out of control. They feel that they don't have any power over the things that are happening to them. They feel lonely and isolated. And all of those things put together, as a psychologist, this is what I would say, just provide a perfect storm for conspiracy theories to flourish. And I think that's what we've seen in the last couple of years, at least now. But they have always been with us. I suppose that is the bottom line. They're nothing new, but in times of crisis, we do see much more of this sort of way of thinking as people are just trying to make sense of a very, very complex situation that they're really struggling with. And we also know that if you believe in one of these sorts of narratives, you're more likely to go down this rabbit hole and find others and kind of get a little bit lost in information.
I mean, if it's part of our nature, which is, you describe, it's been around essentially, I think, as old as time. It's as when you have civilization, you have conspiracy theories. If it's part of our nature, there are two questions that arise. One is it possible to eliminate them? And the second question, though, is it necessary or even desirable to eliminate them completely, given that it just seems to be part of the human condition?
Yeah, good questions. I think that some people would say, no, we should not eliminate this way of thinking because it's quite similar to just a general cynicism or skepticism that you want to encourage. But of course, it isn't exactly the same as this. If people are rejecting science and not getting vaccinated and not doing things that they perhaps should be doing, then it can become a problem. But at the same time, it raises issues of censorship and free speech and all of those sorts of things. And I think that a lot of people would say, no, you should never tell people that you shouldn't believe in conspiracy theories or be skeptical in any kind of way. But in terms of getting, like, if you wanted to get somebody not to believe in conspiracy theories, that is possible, but general debunking isn't really successful.
Is it the same kind of processes that people use to get them out of cults? The same kind of, because it's very cult-like.
Yeah, similar, yeah. So like de-radicalization types of techniques. Another technique that's being used a bit now is they call it inoculation, and it is kind of just like giving someone a vaccine. So you give someone a very weak piece of misinformation or a very weak form of a conspiracy theory, and then when they come across a stronger influence attempt, they'll be more able to reject it. And sometimes giving people just factual information before they come across a conspiracy theory can mean that the conspiracy theory it's more difficult to take root. But on the other hand, once you present the conspiracy theory first, trying to debunk it is more of a challenge.
So is it like a kind of psychological whack-a-mole? So if somebody, you get them to decide that the virus isn't caused by 5G, but then all of a sudden they're going to think, well, actually, maybe the Earth is flat. Do you think that there are kind of conspiracy-minded personality types that are going to search for those kind of explanations?
It is absolutely like that. And I think that some scholars would argue that there is a general kind of mindset that makes people more attracted to conspiracy theories than other types of explanations.
So on that note, is whack-a-mole an actual game, or is it just something used in analogies? Because
I think they play it in American fairgrounds.
Do they?
Yes.
With real moles?
Yes, absolutely. Moles were hurt in the making of that game.
Wow.
I don't know. It's got.
Sorry, I've never heard of this. So this.
Something to take with you when you go home, the whack-a-mole game.
It doesn't really exist, like that German town. I'm interested, can you enlarge a little bit on the German town that doesn't exist? What's the basis of that conspiracy theory?
I think it was satirical from the beginning. I mean, Angela Merkel made the same.
Is it just a very boring place?
I think they would ask you the question, do you know anyone from Bielefeld? Have you ever been to Bielefeld? And the answer to that question will, almost inevitably be no. And I think if you have been there, some of us have been there, it's a forgettable town.
Right.
But the Germans, with their famous sense of humor, have been making this joke for decades, as it turns out.
Would it work with Swindon, do you think?
But I think that's quite interesting because that does seem to connect with some, the idea that there do now seem to be people who will not believe something unless they've actually experienced it. So, well, you say Peterborough exists, but I've never been there. And you kind of that bit of just accepting that there will be some things you have not done, that the fact you haven't done them or the fact you haven't been there does not mean they don't exist. It doesn't require you to actually go there to then bring it into existence.
Well, I think that there's clearly an appetite for this kind of things aren't real business, because there's that satirist in America who started putting up posters saying pigeons aren't real. And this was a joke. He was just making a joke. But then he was saying they're all drones and robots. And then people started believing it. Now, he's a joker, and now he's making a nice bit of money out of T-shirts with pigeons aren't real and all the rest of it. But there are lots of people who are now convinced that pigeons are not quite men in suits, but they're all drones and robots.
I still like that idea of just giving people a homeopathic amount of the JFK assassination, and the next thing you know, they believe lizards rule the universe.
That's a good example, though, JFK, right? So David Aronovich has written a book about conspiracy theory called Voodoo History. It's a really good book. And he sort of begins it by saying, you probably think that you're someone, because no one who is an actual conspiracy theorist would buy a book debunking conspiracy theorists. So it's for people, you might say, like us, who think, no, we don't believe in all this. But it begins by saying, there's probably one you do believe, and it's JFK. He says that probably people in here, we can do it. Who here thinks JFK has a bit of conspiracy to it, the assassination?
No one's going to put their hand up.
Oh, there's someone over there who's back and to the left.
Yeah, there's a few people. Now, I know it's not television, but I'm going to say a few people put their hand up. But I probably thought that, more or less. And then he points out, which is not generally known, it might be generally known, but not known to me, that 6 months before he shot JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald tried to shoot a retired general called General Edwin Walker with a sniper rifle and blah, blah, blah. And that, you'd think that sort of would be in the mix of all these people saying, well, what about this? The warrant.
Well, exactly. He tried to and failed. So how would he suddenly be able to hit something when once he hadn't hit something before? You don't have the conspiracy mindset
also,
here, David, do you?
General Edwin wasn't in a convertible, as far as I know. No, but my point is that, there are some conspiracy theories that even someone like me, who's very think, I would never believe in a conspiracy theory, probably just ended up by osmosis, vaguely thinking there might be something in that one. And JFK is probably the, as you say, the kind of, what's the word, the entry drug for conspiracy theories. Because one of the other things I think about conspiracy theory is once you start to believe it, it's very difficult to row back on it. It's like everything else has to fall into line with your conspiracy theory. Otherwise, you have to say, I was wrong, or we were wrong, which everyone finds very difficult to say. I read this thing the other day that Mark Twain said it's much easier to fool people than to get people to admit that they were fooled. And you can see this because lots of people still support Brexit.
For balance, no, I'm not even going to bother.
And also, thank you for that. It was not at all difficult to get into the country this morning.
Does it? I suppose the question is, does it matter? We've covered that a bit, but in terms of solutions, given that it matters that we all agree on some shared facts in a society such as ours, where it's very necessary, as you said, during a pandemic, for example, or with the challenge of climate change, for example, we have to all agree on some shared
I think it's also really important that, people are challenged on things like Holocaust denial, or that Sandy Hook was some kind of set-up. All these things, these are deeply offensive and also very, very damaging things that people actually believe to be true.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, every time develops its own critical tools, right? I don't think we should think about it in terms of reversal or going back or any of those things. I mean, I think we need to figure out new and perhaps adaptive models that will provide us the tools by which we can make sense not just of what's happening now, but also of what's happening tomorrow, right? That's why it also never makes sense if you're just debunking some kind of weird Trumpian conspiracy theory. Right? That's not the problem. The problem is, as you also mentioned, there's a kind of a type or there's a kind of an attitude behind it of, having this hermeneutic overdetermination everywhere. You're seeing that stuff sort of everywhere potentially. So it seems rather that we need to find a new vocabulary and a new kind of, a set of critical tools that will help us not just here or now, but precisely to bridge that.
Isn't the thing we really need to teach at school, and we don't do this in England anyway, and that's philosophy. So in France, all the students, whatever kind of baccalaureate they're studying, they all have to sit the philosophy paper. They all learn the basics of philosophical thinking, of thinking about thinking, and therefore, it's not critical thinking, but it's actually a deeper way of trying to think about how we know things. And as a university lecturer, when we get students who've done the international baccalaureate rather than A-levels, they've got a much broader way of thinking, a much richer understanding of the world than your average English student. So for any students out there listening, thinking about what they should do, study philosophy.
I would love to agree also, but of course we've seen the political situation in France, and although it's like everywhere incomparable, and I'm saying this with respect, and on the BBC, incomparable to the UK situation, which I guess to many of us who aren't living here seems quite funny. Le Pen is up. The situation in France is also quite awful. In spite of philosophy.
Yeah, so we thank you so much. We have also asked our audience what conspiracy theory they'd like to start. And obviously Tim started the conspiracy theory that Tina Turner is somehow in charge of everything. We found that out earlier on. What have you got, Brian?
Well, pi is 4.1. But it can be. It just depends on the geometry of the surface. So that's not a conspiracy theory. It's an accurate description of a curved surface, Riemannian geometry.
So what is true over here is in fact not true over there.
We're talking about the difference between the geometry of surfaces.
Leave it, Brian, I've won.
Yeah. I've never seen you look happier. Door handles exist solely to catch on tall people's trouser pockets to publicly embarrass them. That's from Ben. You'll see him as he walks out with his trousers flapping about.
Schrodinger's cat was actually a strawberry. We have a distinguished guest on the panel because Matthew, you were at the original strawberry
I was in there.
discussion.
It was very exciting.
How do you know the strawberry's dead?
Well, you send two of them through a slit, and as long as you don't.
Thank you very much to our panel, Karen Douglas, Matthew Cobb, Tim Vermeulen and David Baddiel. Next week, for the purposes of balance, we're going to make sure that we have an entirely non-animal panel. We are going to have guests including a vase of daffodils, an oak tree and a punnet of strawberries, which, to be honest, the last time I saw it did not look well. So
I hope it's still alive anyway, the strawberry and the punnet.
Yeah, well, now Matthew's here as well. It's like we've finally created that eternal loop where people are now just trapped in 162 episodes going round and round, returning to the dead strawberry alive again.
But really, how do we know if it's dead?
Well, it's dying. It's not dead.
Goodbye.
Dying.
Monkey cage without your trousers in the infinite monkey cage. Till now, nice again.
Hello, I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox, and this is the Infinite Monkey Cage.
Now, anyone who has been to a Barry Manilow concert, how many have been to a Barry Manilow concert? Yeah, and there's no shame in right? That's the whole... obviously, the listeners at home can't see, but the whole audience, their hands went up there. All of us fans, and I'm not saying this ironically, Mandy and Copacabana, Stone Cold classics. But if you have been to a Barry Manilow concert, and I believe he's on tour again next year, then you will know that if Brian is ever in the audience, Barry Manilow has to actually book more security, because the moment he starts singing Could It Be Magic, Brian stands up and shouts, no, it couldn't, though it could currently lie within the terrain of apparently anomalous activity, which currently is not understood with the realms of science, but the laws of physics will eventually explain this action and/or reaction. And Barry doesn't like that because it doesn't scan. Also, if you ever go to an ABBA tribute band, you'll find exactly the same thing happens when they do Take a Chance on Me, and then Brian will immediately turn it from being a lovely 3-minute pop song to a kind of epic poem of equations about probability. It's like Beowulf, but without the fun.
Taking a chance is fundamental in science, as long as you work within well-established parameters.
And that, by the way, is what he writes in every Valentine card that he sends as well.
Today, we're looking at the science and psychology of magic.
What does our predilection to be bamboozled by sleight of hand tell us about how our mind works? What can we learn about perception from watching a man with a cup and sponge balls?
Isn't that more of a medical problem?
He's getting end of the pier, isn't he, for tonight? Yes.
Anyway, I said it in my... Isn't that more of a medical problem?
Not a medical problem. He's getting a couple of sponge balls, anyway. So, what of the psychology of the magicians themselves? And does the ability to link rings ultimately tell us something about the nature of matter?
No.
OK, good. That's the first part of the show dealt with. We are now joined by 3 magicians, though it might not be 3 magicians by the time we let them out of the box. It might be loads of magicians or none whatsoever. And also someone who created the illusion of being a magician, and they are...
I'm Professor Richard Wiseman, psychologist at the University of Hertfordshire, and been a magician since I was 8 years old. The most astounding thing I've ever read about in magic is one of my favourite tricks, the vanishing elephant. And the description of it is 2 people pushed on a large box, they put the elephant inside, open the doors and it's gone, and then 15 people push off the box. And where has the elephant gone? That's...
My name is Dr. Gustav Krohn. I'm an associate professor in psychology at the University of Plymouth. My most amazing magic trick is probably the vanishing ball illusion. For this trick, a magician throws a ball up in the air and it disappears. Now, the trick itself is not really that amazing, but the psychology that underpins it is astonishing, because the way the trick works is it exploits the fact that we are all seeing the future. It's not a huge amount, it's about a fraction of a second, but we're all doing this all the time without ever really thinking about it. And without this ability to see the future, I wouldn't be able to catch a ball, and I definitely wouldn't have been able to cross the road to get here.
We're going to have to explore that, because I believe you see the past, you see, because of the finite nature of the speed of light. But let us discuss.
I'm Laura London, a close-up magician with a particular particular fascination in the world of gambling, cheating techniques, and sleight of hand. The most impactful magic trick I've ever seen is when I was 6 years old. It's called the Run Rabbit Run. It's actually a terrible trick, so I can see Richard's like, oh, really? It is a terrible trick. It's sort of a kid's magic effect, but the way in which it made every single person feel at that party when I was 6 years old was the reason I decided I wanted to become a magician. And if you don't know what it is, it's this little wooden contraption with a rabbit that sort of just appears and disappears, and a bit like a Punch and Judy show. The kids go, oh, it's over there. So a sweet little thing, not particularly mystifying, but certainly a classic, and one that I love.
I'm Alan Davis. I'm a comedian, and I played Jonathan Creek, the master creator of illusions and solver of murders, obviously. And the most astounding trick I ever saw, I went to see Jerry Sadowitz, a great close-up magician, and I was sitting in the front row, inches from him, and it was a small little venue, and he got very hot, and he took his, it was too hot in my hat, and he took his hat off and put it on the table, did some tricks, and when he lifted his hat to put it back on, there was a watermelon there. Blew my mind, and that's 20 years ago. I'm not over it.
And this is our panel. Start with, I just want to know, Richard. I just want to ask Richard though about 8 years old. That is that the classic age to kind of start?
Most magicians get into magic when they're either 8 or 10, and it's normally something a grandparent has shown to them. So I used to go and visit my grandfather most weekends. So he would give me a Victorian penny, I'd put my initials on it, he'd make it disappear, and then it'd appear in a box under his seat. And every single weekend I would say, badger him, tell me how this was done. And he wouldn't. And he did this great thing. He said, the secret is in a book, and the book is in your local library. So I had to go and work hard. It's not like nowadays where everything is easily won on the internet. So I read all the books on magic in the library, eventually went back to him, said, this is how it's done. He said, that's correct. I said, it requires a little secret something. Magicians call a gimmick. He said, that's correct. He handed me that secret something. And now in my office, it sits there on my desk. And the other day, a journalist said to me, if your house was to burn down, what's the one thing you would take? And I said, it's that little bit of metal, because it changed my life.
That's fantastic.
Gustav, so picking up on what you said, that we all see the future. So what did you mean by that?
Well, to understand that, you need to take a look at how we process visual information. Now, vision happens in the brain. Like, we use our eyes to capture visual information, and that's then transmitted through lots of neurons to different centers in our brain, the visual cortex, where the vision happens. Now, this information processing is not instantaneous. It takes a bit of time, and it takes roughly 1/10 of a second. So what that means is that as I'm seeing the world, by the time I'm experiencing it, it's already the past. Now, 1/10 of a second doesn't really sound like that much, but in neural terms, that's a huge amount. So if you're walking down the street at about 1 meter per second, that basically means that the world should be lagging about 10 centimeters behind you. But of course it doesn't. And the reason why it doesn't is because we are predicting the future. So what you are seeing as the now is not actually the now, but it's your brain using information from the past to predict the future or the now. And quite a lot of magic tricks rely on this. So in the vanishing ball illusion, if I just pretend to throw a ball up in the air, most people see a ball moving up and then disappearing somewhere up in the air. And the reason why this works is because your brain is being tricked into anticipating what's going to happen in the future. It's a bit like with the dog. When you pretend to throw the stick, the dog runs, and it's the same with vision.
So what all the magician's actually doing then is just making the ball disappear in their own hands?
Well, not all magicians, and there's lots of more complex tricks as well, but that is one principle that you can use.
Where are they putting the ball then? Or do you get thrown out the magic circle if you turn?
I'm not going to reveal that.
This is one of the great things about this show, is we've basically got a panel of people who are members of the magic circle. It's sworn to secrecy in telling you how any tricks work, which is like as if we did like our episode from CERN, and it turns out they've started a particle physicist circle in which they're sworn to secrecy to tell you how they discovered the Higgs field and the Higgs boson. So this could be not as educational as we'd hoped.
Alan, so you've heard Richard's touching story. Were you interested in magic before you played Jonathan Creek?
There was a lot of magic on TV when we were kids. This doesn't seem to be so much now. There was that guy Nixon, do you remember him? There was Paul Daniels. There seemed to be quite a lot of stuff going on. And it was, and people were always getting sawn in half. So I think everyone loved magic. And when Jonathan Creek came along, I knew that Creek was obsessed with magic. And this is one of the amazing things about magic, is if you want to be a magician, but perhaps you confirm this, you need to know the entire history of the craft before you begin to embark on putting an act together. It's very difficult to come up with new stuff, because it's much more complicated than telling a funny story. The actual kind of mechanics of a trick need to be rehearsed and practiced. It's a great physical skill. So, even more than juggling or something. It takes a huge amount of dedication and a lot of time spent alone. And I was much too lazy to do that. So it was much easier just to get a microphone and talk. So I have a lot of admiration. When we did one episode of Jonathan Creek, I had to learn to scale cards, which means to throw cards. And I had Ricky Jay, the famous card manipulator, Ricky Jay's book was all about how to scale cards. And I was throwing them around my living room, and one got stuck into a plant. I'd thrown it quite hard. And I thought, I can really do this now. And then I turned the page and it said, do not practice for more than 15 minutes at a time. You'll get a repetitive strain injury. Now, at that point, I'd thrown about 300 playing cards, and the next day I could not move my wrist and couldn't do the scene properly, so we had to get a card that was weighted with quite a heavy piece of metal that anyone could have knocked the bottle off the table with. But no, it's much more. I'm greatly impressed, but first of all, the dedication of it, but also it's like swan's legs underwater. There's so much going on that you can't see. I think it's fascinating.
Well, Laura, Alan was talking about that practice, and I know you were warming up with the cards in the dressing room, which was astonishing. And I think we're going to try something that is clearly silly for the radio audience, which is we're going to do.
Well, they've done ventriloquism on the radio.
More like a scientist. We're going to do something rather silly now, and
magic on the radio.
Okay, well, we'll have to describe what happens, Alan, if you don't mind. We'll do the magic with you as you are.
Just getting the cards out of the pack. The cards are out the pack.
Next to me.
Can I ask you, Laura, just on that, because in the green room you were saying you still hadn't worked out which trick you were going to do. So just with that pack of cards, how many tricks do you think you have in your head that you think, once I've got a pack of cards, what are the choices?
I mean, there's 52 cards in a deck. There are infinite possibilities with a deck of cards. I mean, I have a show called Cheat, which has all gambling, cheating demonstrations. What I'm going to do with you is sort of, I guess, a bit of a standard and classic magic effect that we would do with cards. So they're actually quite extraordinary and can do so many things, but it does take a lot of practice.
I see, I'm now anxious. And this is part of the magician's work. It's made me feel unstable.
I could ask Richard to commentate here, like John
we should say with 52 cards, there are so many combinations that when you shuffle them, it's a random shuffle, and there's almost been no deck of cards ever that's been in that order. So it's a phenomenal idea. There's just so many combinations, and a normal shuffle, probably no deck, and all the hundreds and thousands of decks in the world all been shuffled, and there's not been that particular order before. So there's lots of interesting science and stats built up in cards. But yes, I'm very happy. So Laura's now got the cards. Yes.
All right, Alan, I tell you what, instead of saying pick a card, which is a sort of very standard thing magicians will say, I'll say name a card, one that you like.
8 of clubs is excellent.
Not going to lie, I was hoping you'd say the Ace of Spades, but sure, we'll go with it. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to shuffle these cards, and you and I are going to play a little game. Okay, it's a very simple game, don't worry. I'd like you to hold your hand out for me. Oh, but sorry, what was the card you said? The 8 of clubs. Okay, we will come back to that in just a minute, but before that, I'm going to cut the deck 3 times. You can see that, that's fair. We're going to take this top card.
Yeah, but you did that in a really weird way.
For the radio audience.
You did it in a kind of a spinny, twisty way.
That way of cutting the deck is not the way that I would be able to cut a deck.
But can we all confirm on this panel, I did indeed just shuffle the cards and I cut the deck.
Yeah, in a way with dexterity.
Which looked fancy.
Yes. Laura shuffled and cut the deck.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the top card of this shuffled deck and place it right there on your hand, okay? It doesn't actually matter what it is. In this case, it's the Jack of Clubs. You can all see that, the Jack of Clubs. And I'm going to place it right there on the table, and I want you to put your hand over the top of it. Here's the game. I'm going to take that from you without you noticing.
Okay.
All right, if this works, the rest will be easy, and I promise you I will find your 8 of clubs. But before we do, we need to warm you up a little bit. So I've got the Queen of clubs. You've got I think it was the Jack. Nice and convenient. So here we go. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this to distract you. Are you ready? 1, 2. So if I just give that a spin on my finger,
Yeah.
I should now have the jack right here. So if I have the jack in my hand, Alan, what's in yours?
It's the Ace of Clubs.
Oh, the Eight of Clubs, the one you want. Well, that works out very well. All right. Write your name on there for me. We'll just do one more very quick thing. Just write your name on there for me. Okay, so now it's very distant, because you might think...
So Alan signed his name on
Yes,
the
you-
Eight of Clubs.
I wrote
which
Alan.
appeared under his hand.
Yes. You might indeed think I had 2 of the Eight of Clubs or something like that. So now it's got your name on it. It is very distinctive. If I take your card and I make a bend in it like so we can all see that, now it's even more distinctive, because if you can all see that, and I'll just show you as well in the audience, you can see it's got a bit bend, so it's very distinctive. And I place the rest of the cards on top there, watch. I'm going to make it go through the deck, okay? So it hopefully will come to the top. It's about 4 now, and it's okay. Like 3, 2... No, don't stop staring at it. It's your power that's making this happen, quiet. 3, 1 card. Jumps to the very top of the deck. And a card has just popped to the top of the deck.
A card has popped
Whether
to the top of the deck.
Whether it's yours remains to be seen. But just take that for me and show everyone if it is yours. There you go.
It is.
Now,
It is
thank you.
mine.
Would you like me to tell you how it works? I'll tell you very quickly how it works. See, I always know where this card is, always, by means of misdirection and practice. For example, if I place this card inside the middle of the deck, which you can see me very fairly doing, and I cut the deck, I can shuffle the cards as much as I like. It makes no real difference, Alan. You see, I always know where the card is. For example, I can shuffle these cards as much as I like. I mean, I do know where it is, because I put it there, Alan, but the thing is, the reason I can shuffle these is because your card is actually not here anymore.
What?
Yeah, so the question is, if I don't have the card, where is it?
It could be anywhere.
It's actually right in front of you, and if you look, everyone, there is a box. I had that box there, card case, right there in the middle, and if you all listen...
Yeah.
Have a look inside here. There is 1 card, and it's folded into 4 pieces. Alan, if you just take that, if it is yours, please
Folded.
share with everyone.
I'm opening it up, and it's the Eight of Clubs with my name on it. But, you never touched the case, though, did you? Did you touch the case? Did you see her?
Misdirection, Alan. There we go.
So
You missed it.
Laura also does a lot of ID theft. Now you've given her half your signature.
So Gustav, can we analyse that trick? So obviously, we're not how to describe how you did it. I have no idea how you did it. It was stunning. But in terms of those ideas of misdirection, as you said, about human perception, how would you begin to break down what happened in a typical card trick like that?
A typical card trick involves loads of deception and misdirection, and involves all of our senses as well, and all of our cognitive processes as well. So on one hand, you manipulate what you see and what you don't. So we can use attentional misdirection to misdirect the information that you process and the things that you miss. But even the things that you do see, so when you see something, you may not be able to remember exactly what happened, or you may falsely remember something as well. So we call this memory misdirection, where you can use ways in which you can influence the way that someone will afterwards remember what they've just seen. But even if you accurately remember exactly what's happened, you may just not have the reasoning capacity, or your reasoning may be influenced by certain biases, and that can then prevent you from actually working out how the trick is done. So a typical magic trick involves loads of layers of misdirection and deception that will hopefully prevent the audience from working out how the trick is done.
I mean, Laura's quite brilliant at it, but really it's the speed with which she can do things. Much faster with her fingers and her hands than I anticipate a normal human could be. So I have all this, you were speaking earlier about the knowledge we have of how the world works. A person could do certain things, but a person can't fold a card up and put it in the box.
They can if they have no life and spend a lot of time on their own with a deck of cards.
That is one of the secrets of being
That's
a magician,
absolutely the
isn't it?
secret. Just
Avoid
have no
all other
life and
forms
spend a
of
lot of
life.
time on your own.
But also, that's the perception that's being played with, it seems to me, is it's much, much quicker than I expected it could be possible to do.
Well, also, we didn't mention the fact that, again, people listening at home don't know about all the distractions, because the way you levitated that hippopotamus was extremely impressive. So a lot of us were looking at that at the same time. And if you could keep it up there, because it's going to mess with the sound otherwise.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And Alan's right. I mean, two things Laura's amazingly good at. One is doing one thing and talking at the same time, which we're not used to doing. Normally, our actions are consistent with our words, but Laura needs to be talking and doing something completely different at the same time. The other thing, which is so hard and where most magicians struggle, is you're lying to people, you're deceiving them, and yet you have to come across as likable. And that's the real skill to magic, and the bit where most magicians fail. It's why most audiences hate magicians. And Laura's brilliant at doing that. So I think that's great. But the other thing you should realise is I think most magic is like a science experiment. So there's a procedure to be done, and the outcome of that experiment is the audience are fooled and entertained. And it's really, really difficult. And so people have been doing those types of tricks, that particular one, since about 1850. And every time they get it right, they write it down, and that goes into the literature of magic, which is as big as literature of science or law. Magicians have their own secret Google that's got 3 million pages of information on. And if you're going to perform that trick that well, you need to know all that stuff stretching back through history. That trick was performed to Harry Houdini and fooled him. So it's known as the trick that fooled Houdini. You need to know all that stuff if you're going to do it competently, and it's all hidden from an audience. So that's what I find so amazing about that performance.
But also when it comes to misdirection, I know that Gustav has done a lot of sort of study in this, but I sort of come from it in a very different angle, in that because I perform very regularly and I do the same thing over and over again, or many of the things I do often, my misdirection comes from just doing it. So without even thinking, it just happens. So I can tell you where this lady was looking, or, you know, where she is, or if I'm surrounded by people, I'm very aware, almost without knowing I'm aware of it. But for example, me putting a card in that card case, I could do surrounded now because I've done it so many times.
Well, I wanted to ask Gustav, in terms of studying human perception, which is what you do, how useful is it to study close-up magic? Is it really kind of a focused, almost distilled experiment to see how it can be that humans can become distracted? And does that give you insight into their cognitive process?
Yes, so we study misdirection in the lab, and we use lots of scientific tools. So for example, we've got eye trackers that there's like goggles that we can put on people's faces, and then we can work out exactly where they are looking.
Oh, so with Alan, for example, in that trick, you could.
Yeah, so exactly. Alan will be wearing an eye tracker, and that gives me precise online measurements of exactly where he's looking.
That's a very worrying development.
And we can then correlate this with what they experience. And so one of the biggest surprises has been that quite often people can actually be looking at something and yet they don't see it. So we typically assume that if you're keeping your eye on something, then you should be able to see it. But actually, if your attention is being misdirected from this, then huge things can happen in front of your eyes, and yet you don't see them.
But that's purely instinctive from your perspective, as you'd said. So you were not aware, or are not aware of this detailed research, certainly when you started learning, but you somehow instinctively are misdirected. You know that someone can be looking at something, but actually if you do something, then they won't actually see what you're doing,
and I was
even
looking
if they're
at it.
staring.
I mean, I knew when Laura put that card down, I said, put your hand on that, that's a jack of clubs. And I was thinking, there's no way that's a jack of club. This is a trick.
Everything happens ahead of time.
I was staring at the card and couldn't tell when she flipped it over that she'd changed it or what she'd done from 6 inches away. It's really frightening.
I was scared because I thought you were going to be so angry that you'd been beaten, you were going to use it as a weapon.
Throw it into a plant.
We use our misunderstanding of attention. Magicians use it against us. So there's an old adage which is, the closer you look, the less you'll see. Mm-hmm. So because you can really concentrate on here, that's where you put your attention. Of course, at that point, the secret stuff is happening outside of that. And then when you go big, the secret stuff is happening where you did focus your attention previously, but now aren't. So magicians are ahead of the game all the time, and you learn it by doing it again and again and again for real people.
Are there actually new magic tricks being invented, or they're a bit like the fact there are only 7 stories, supposedly? Are we generally seeing a reinvention of the techniques that are now in existence?
Yeah, I think there's been a constant evolution of magic tricks, the way that technology is being used now as well. So there's internet magic, there's Zoom magic. Our studies show it's not very popular, unsurprising. But a lot of magic is technology driven, and so the kind of effects that you see now, you couldn't imagine to have seen back in the 1950s.
What about when you're performing 2 magicians? Or I presume, much like when, comedians used to do the water rats and all that kind of, finding the joke that will break through them just go, oh, yeah, I know that done. Oh, yeah, no. Are there, extra tricks and layers of tricks there that are still going on all the time?
I would say there probably is, yes. It's actually quite a big thing. In magic, we have conventions all around the world, and actually thousands of magicians gather together in several parts of the world quite regularly, actually. There's places in like Vegas, we've got one in Blackpool. And when this happens, magicians will tend to be doing magic at 6 a.m. and trying to fool each other. It's quite a thing. I mean, I don't. I think what's interesting is to see someone with great skill and presentation, and I don't care whether it's a magician or not. What I want is to be entertained more than anything. And I've always looked at magic in the way that I would hope my audience look at the magic I perform.
So I went to Blackpool Magicians Convention once, 4,500 magicians. I was staying in a hotel, and it advertised 2 sausages and beans for £10 for breakfast. And so that included the hotel. That was the entire thing.
That's still expensive for Blackpool. So out of season, definitely.
So we're all there, and breakfast came, and what they'd done is taken one sausage and cut it diagonally, put the 2 thin ends together and covered it with beans, so it looked like 2 sausages. To a room of magicians. And we all sat there, no one said a word.
Gustav, the card trick, we've talked about misdirection, but there's also persuasion. So I'm thinking more of someone like Darren Brown, for example. So could you talk a bit about that third technique, which is persuasion?
Yeah, so, I mean, magicians use a lot of misdirection, but in a lot of card tricks, it can rely on forcing. So forcing is a principle whereby you can influence the card that someone will choose. And there's a whole range of principles that can be used to do this. And the key to this is to influence someone's decision without them feeling that they've been influenced. So if you're doing a card trick and I say, okay, here's the 8 of diamonds, that's your card, that's a pretty rubbish card trick because you know that the card's been forced. What's much more effective is if I use a principle that often relies on exploiting cognitive biases, for example, to get you to pick that card automatically. So for example, if I place 4 cards on the table and I say to you, touch one of these cards, there's a 60% chance that you will touch the card that is right in front of you. But the really
now there's not.
Not now. Now you know that it's done. But the interesting thing is that people are not aware of these biases. And these are the kind of biases that are often exploited by supermarkets, for example, or marketing, where they will put high-priced items in more convenient locations for you to buy.
But that's not sufficient, is it, to build a trick around? So how do you... Is it possible to make a suggestion to someone that you absolutely know that they are going to do what you wanted them to do? Richard's just shaking his head. So the answer, maybe I should ask Richard. No is the answer. So how can it be used then in this framework?
Well, as I said, kind of like magic relies on lots of layers of deception, and that could just be one of these layers. There are other techniques, but I'm not really going to go into these here.
I told you.
We thought this might be a very short show. How do you do that? Not telling you. Good night.
Well, but there is a science to that. Because why do magicians hold on to their secrets? And most magic tricks, if you say this is the secret to it, it just sounds trivial. You don't realise how hard it is. It's really, really hard. And if you go, this is the secret, but okay. But not only that, magicians live in this rather miserable world because they haven't got any friends. No, they're not fooled by many things. So they don't get that sense of wonder. I'm looking at Laura's performance there. It doesn't surprise me. It's a wonderful performance. It's extremely skilled. I can see the skill. But I don't have that. Oh, my goodness, it's the 8 of clubs in the box. And that's been taken away from me since I was 8 or 10 when you read all this stuff. And it's such a wonderful experience. It's so incredible to see something that you know to be impossible happen in front of your eyes. That's the reason magicians don't tell you secrets. So you can live in a wonderful world.
And that's why you should stop explaining the universe, Brian. It's much But I'm also fascinated when science and magic start kind of working together. Like, because I was wondering with you, Richard, is the first time when you see perhaps magic being taken seriously in the scientific world was it the 1970s, where there were various people who were doing conjuring tricks and selling them as things that were actually breaking the laws of physics. And that seemed to be a time where people went, oh, magic's actually quite important to understand if people are selling it as I'm actually breaking the laws of physics and you have to rewrite them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the 70s, there was a big sort of increase in paranormal stuff, but then you have the spiritualism stuff before that and Houdini being sceptical about it. I think what is interesting is the frame around the magic. So Laura is being, to use the phrase, an honest deceiver. We know that this is a card trick and we're looking for the secret. There are lots of people who can use the same techniques in a different frame. You can say, oh, I've got psychic powers. You can say, I can contact the dead. You can even perhaps say, oh, I'm reading body language and I'm not doing any of those things. And what's interesting is you give people an explanation. And once they've got an explanation, they're not looking for trickery. So magicians are really up against it. We're all looking for trickery as Laura does that particular effect. You go along to a psychic and you think, well, this is psychic stuff. You're not looking for trickery. It's why their sleight of hand normally is so appalling versus magicians.
You mean the earpiece that a lot of them have?
Sorry?
I remember once, years ago, I was making a television show and on the makeup truck, and there were about 8 or 10 people on the makeup truck. It was a busy morning, a couple of extra makeup women in, and a woman came on and stood at the doorway and said, someone in here's got a birthday. And it wasn't anyone's birthday, but undeterred, she found someone who had a birthday in 2 weeks' time. 10, 12 people in there, and she said, I knew it! I knew it! And then later on, one of the makeup girls said, that was amazing. Wasn't that amazing this morning? She just came in and went straight up to Laura and said, it's your birthday in 2 weeks. I said, she did not do that at all. That isn't what happened at all. You want to believe that? She just came in and fished around for something, and then only you fell for it. And it takes one.
Facebook has really spoilt that somebody who's got a birthday, haven't they?
But one of the things that's quite worrying is just how little it takes for people to believe that it's real magic. So we've been doing lots of scientific studies and looking at the impact that spiritualist demonstrations can have on people's beliefs. So to do so, we invite a magician round to come and do a demonstration. These are usually to a whole group of about 100 psychology students. And I introduce the magician. I say, yeah, this is a psychic who... I don't know whether this is going to work, but we're going to try some experiments, and he can then predict some numbers and contact some dead people as well. And half the participants...
It's just such a great mix, that, isn't it?
Well, it's
Seven and your Uncle Colin.
And the colour as well. You're thinking of the colour red. But the thing that's really worrying is that half the participants in a lot of these studies, they're told that what they are seeing is not real. They are explicitly told that this is a magician using tricks. And yet, in the evaluations, when we asked them, what did you just see? They exclaim it was a psychic, and this was genuine psychic powers. And at first we thought, well, maybe they just didn't read the instructions properly. So we asked them to write the instructions out in their own words. So they would write, Lee is not a real magician. He's a member of the magic circle using tricks. What did you see? A psychic reading someone's mind. And what's really worrying about this is that it perpetuates these beliefs in pseudosciences as well. And we've done this by evaluating their psychic beliefs later on. And even if they're told that what they are seeing is not real, it can still perpetuate some of these beliefs in psychic experiences.
It's an interesting line, I suppose, you have to walk, isn't it? Because you're, as you said, you are, as a magician, exploiting biases or expectations or defects in perception.
Yeah, and none of it matters. What matters is people have a good time.
I also think that you can have conflicting beliefs that can live in our brains simultaneously. So for me, magic is all about a conflict in beliefs. Like, it's a conflict between the beliefs and what we believe to be possible and the things that you just experience. So you know that rabbits can't appear from hats, and yet that's exactly what you've experienced when the magician pulls the rabbit out of the hat. And we've done neuroimaging work where we scan people's brains whilst they watch a whole range of different magic tricks. And one of the things that's really interesting is that we get neural activation in areas that are generally activated when we experience other kind of conflict. So, for example, here, you may try and listen to what I'm saying, but your attention is also being distracted by the person next to you. So that creates a cognitive conflict. And that kind of cognitive conflict activates similar brain areas to when you're watching a magic trick. So for me, I think kind of like the core of magic is all about this conflict between the things that we believe to be possible and the things that we've just experienced.
So part of the enjoyment of it, or the stimulation of a magic trick, is that you know it's not possible, and yet you see it happen. So it's that conflict.
With no suspension of disbelief. That's correct. And it should teach us humility. It should teach us that sometimes we can be incredibly confident and hugely wrong.
What about, I'm interested, do you find that
the more that you've understood magic tricks, the more you've understood conjuring, are there certain things in the world that you can now navigate? Are there certain things that you see, thinking for all the audience who might not go on to do card tricks, whatever it might be, the pragmatic things of learning about how we perceive and how not being taken in?
I mean, apart from the obvious one, which magic gives you the confidence to go and speak to people, which I think is something that we're not born with at all. You know, some people are more introverted, some people are obviously extroverted. But magic, which is why they always say a lot of young boys start doing magic so they can talk to girls. I mean, that's not how I started, but still, it is one of those things that I think magic, it just is such a wonderful way, even if you just do it as a hobby, it's a little, you know, or even just for yourself. I mean, just the nature of practice in itself is a really good thing to be able to do, to focus. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 6 years old, so not like now. A lot of people are sort of finding out what these things are. I knew about it since I was a very little girl. And the doctors told my mum she's not going to do well in school, she's not going to hold down what they called a proper job. I've actually got that on paper, it says proper job. Don't know what that meant. And of course it was true. I don't have a proper job. But what it was, they said that if there's anything she's into that's creative, it should be encouraged, which is why they always say often learning a musical instrument with someone with ADHD is a really good thing. But I always say magic. Magic is that thing, because you have to do the same thing over and over and over again until you get it right. And when you do, it's such a great feeling. It's an amazing thing to know that once you've nailed it, you go out there and you actually perform this thing that you've been practicing to someone. They haven't seen how you've done it, but more than that, they've enjoyed it and they've had that sense of wonder. It's such an amazing feeling.
Could you imagine your life without magic?
Oh, no. I mean, it's all I've ever done. I've never known any other world, and I didn't get into it, you know, because I had someone in my family show me a magic trick. I mean, I did it because I had to. You know, when I saw that first magic trick, that run, rabbit, run, I'm looking for something to do. And that was it. And so I've never not done it. And no, I can't imagine my world without magic. I love it. I love the history of magic. I work in the library at the Magic Circle. We have thousands, 13,000 books in that place alone, full of secrets. I mean, there's never a moment where you're not going to be able to study something in magic. That's for certain. You'll never be bored.
Are there lost tricks in there? There's so many books. Could
millions.
you imagine going and looking through there and finding a trick that you didn't know about, you didn't know existed?
It's very, very, that's what magicians do. They go back to 1910, 1905, they find something, they fool magicians with it, and everyone goes, oh my goodness, amazing, you invented that. And you go, you know, it's 120 years old. That's fairly kind of common. It's incredible.
One of my favourite things to do is we also have magic magazines, and quite a lot of them, and they've been going for over 100 years, some of them, and they always say if you want to hide a secret in magic, you know, publish it in a magazine, which is what a lot of magicians have done. And I've made a thing of collecting them all, and I'm trying to look through them all. And the gems you find that was invented and created by a man nobody's heard of, you know, in 1890, and you suddenly go, wow, gosh, that's amazing. And then you do it. Then you show another magician, they go, oh, wow, you've just invented that. You go, no. Actually, it was invented over 100 years ago, and that's how the skilled kind of magic that, you know, that we all know as, you know, pulling rabbits out of hat, using misdirection, cards, all of those sort of more commonly known things in magic have been around for a long time. And I wouldn't say there's an awful lot that's now new in that world. Only in presentation is new.
I read about one, Harry Houdini, 1920s. He'd be locked into, he'd arrive at a city, and to get some publicity, he'd be asked to be locked into a jail cell. And in Glasgow, he was locked into a cell, and he got lockpicks on him, and he worked for 2.5 hours, and he couldn't pick the lock. And he's sweating, and he's confused, and he's panicking. It's the first time in his life he's going to fail. And he leans against the door, and it swings open, and it's never been locked. So the great magician is trapped by his own assumptions in this cell. So yeah, magicians are fooled in that way, but also that's a kind of new thing, and you find it. I think that's kind of interesting. We could do something with that. So, like Laura said, you know, get into magic, you will never be bored.
Alan, apart from killing pot plants with the 7 of diamonds, making Jonathan Creek, and I know you made a documentary about Houdini as well, did you find going into that world and researching that world, did that change any of your presumptions about what was around you?
I took Creek's attitude on board, which is you don't want to know how it's done. It's really dull. Once you know how it's done, don't ask.
Even with Houdini?
It's a trick. Houdini was slightly different because it's really about illusions, and also for him, he was like an athlete, really. So a lot of it was physical endurance. He could hold his breath for a very long time. He could endure cold temperatures. He was immensely strong. But I've really found that I became very cynical, like Creek is, extremely cynical. Every time I see a magician, I think, okay, what are you doing here? You're fooling me. Don't tell me how you do it. But please, and I'm like, of course you're not reading my mind. No, you're not in two places at once. So I became quite dry and cynical about magic generally. And that helped very, very much in playing the role.
So we asked our audience a question: what magic trick would you most like to be able to perform, and why? What have you got there, Brian?
This one is, I would like to be able to turn blank pieces of paper into £50 notes. Why? Because I'm an accountant.
I'd like to be able to diss a pear, because I don't really like pears.
I've got abracadabra. My husband not only listens to me, but agrees with everything I say. Clearly he doesn't, Ruthie.
I'd like to turn my children into spider plants until they're 18. Spider plants are low maintenance and just need water and don't answer back. There's a level of negativity in tonight. There's a lot of people in the audience tonight. Family life has not worked out for them. There's some more for you.
Vivian says, of which magic trick would you most like to be able to perform or why? To transform myself into a new particle so Brian can discover me for himself.
I love it when people use the joke sheet for flirting. This is,
And is there a phone number?
There's directions to the row and the seat.
Turn water into wine because drinks can only get better.
There's always one, isn't there?
Magically reverse entropy so that things can only get better. Yeah. The ability to breathe underwater indefinitely because things can only get wetter. Thank you very much to our panel, Gustav Kuhn, Laura London, Richard Wiseman and Alan Davis. Anyway, in the next thrilling episode, I'm very pleased, we are going to be dealing with something that always puts a big smile on Brian's face, and that is we will be dealing with the potential for all life on Earth to be destroyed. Does make you happy, that, doesn't it?
Not entirely fair.
Actually, to be fair, that is not. Well, one, it's a lie, because you always have a big smile on your face. It's very much your angle. But also, two, it's not really the thing that makes you happiest. Any regular listeners know the thing that really makes Brian happy is imagining the end of all life in the universe, as well as the loss of all structure and form. And so it's nothing more than an inactive sea of particles. You love a heat death,
I love a heat death.
He loves a heat death. Who's up for a heat death?
I love it.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
In the infinite monkey cage. Now nice again.